Rookie witch and CSI agent Blair Vavrin isn't sure which one is going to kill her first, Zeus losing his mind and threatening to bring the world down with him, or the devastatingly powerful, impossibly handsome, and maddeningly secretive detective whose refusal to leave her side has her heart about to beat its way out of her chest. Blair Vavrin traded her purposeless California life for something magical, literally. Now she's a rookie witch and agent with the Circe Security Initiative, stationed in Silver Mist, Maine, where the fog is a glamour spell and the diner owner is a satyr named Pan. She handles missing cauldrons and vandal spells, and she loves every single minute of it. Then Zeus loses his mind, and Blair's very ordinary Monday falls apart. With a Category 4 hurricane bearing down on New England and murderous thunderbolts turning Silver Mist into a war zone, Blair is pulled off her beloved desk and thrown into a case that could end the world. Her partner, Theodore, the mysterious, impeccably suited stranger she's been quietly obsessing over at the diner counter for weeks, who turns out to be INTERPOL, catches bullets barehanded, deflects spell bolts like they're nothing, and still won't tell her his last name. Their only lead, gold dust on Zeus' hands and one missing siren. Blair is a level 1 witch. The stakes are planetary. Her partner is the most powerful and most infuriating man she's ever met. And somehow, against all reasonable odds, she's the one who might just save everyone. A witty paranormal mystery laced with slow-burn romance, Greek mythology, and one self-made witch who really, truly should have stayed at her desk. Olympus Bewitched. Witches of CSI No. 1. By Marian T. Writing as Alice Bloom. Copyright 2026 by Marian Panera. All rights reserved. This audiobook and its contents are protected under copyright law. No part of this audiobook may be reproduced, distributed, transmitted, uploaded, recorded, publicly performed, or shared in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the copyright holder, except for brief quotations used in reviews or commentary permitted by law. Unauthorized copying, re-uploading, or redistribution of this audiobook is strictly prohibited. All characters and events appearing in this work are fictitious. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, businesses, companies, events, or locales is purely coincidental. Thank you for listening. Prologue. 2. Candidate 1515. From recruitment@circesecurityinitiative.com. Subject, Invitation. Dear Neophyte Witch. If you are receiving this email, this means you have passed our background check for potential self-taught witches. Our selection process is simple but exacting. We only entertain candidates of good moral character and with a well-documented interest in Greek mythology. Thus, it is based on these factors that we are offering you a job with our company. The Circe Security Initiative is one of the most respected and accomplished supernatural agencies in the world as well as one of the oldest in history. Attached to this email is a document containing additional information about our company and the nature of your job if you're to accept our offer. While employment with CSI does require you to move to Silver Mist, Maine, we believe that the compensation package we're providing in return is more than competitive. Most of all, you'll have magic in your life. We hope that our proposal merits your consideration and look forward to communicating with you soon. Yours truly, Circe, Sorceress and Goddess. Chapter 1. It was a fine Monday morning when I stepped out of the front door, and I flipped to the next page of A Witch's Guide to Silver Mist as I made my way to Panda's Diner. It was the only breakfast place in town, located just several blocks away at the corner of Green Street. With my nose buried between the pages of my guidebook, my body weaved automatically in between students on their way to school and housewives exchanging gossip en route to Demi's bakery. Normal, right? And I supposed it was, if you discounted the fact that the students were perched casually on broomsticks gliding waist-high in the air. And those housewives, gossiping about the latest episode of Rich Witches of Salem, which, if what they were saying was true, was completely scripted and not a reality show as its producers kept insisting it to be. An ordinary day in Silver Mist all in all, and if you're wondering what other humans would think if they stumbled on this scene, well, that's what this town's name was all about. Coastal towns like ours were always the foggiest in Maine, but Silver Mist was a little bit different. The faint mist that covered our streets all year round was a glamour spell, and it prevented human strangers from seeing what they weren't supposed to see. Like pandas, for instance. Humans would only see a dilapidated, burnt-down motel, but in reality it was a sprawling, well-kept diner with the words "Non-Humans Welcome" flashing in rainbow colors on its LED display. Panda's was unsurprisingly full by the time I made it to its doors, with most locals in the habit of coming in early so they could take their time chatting over pancakes and homemade brews before heading out to queue for the 8 a.m. bus. A quick glance around the Panda wallpaper diner showed one vacant seat left at the end of the counter, and luckily for me it was also right next to Mr. Handsome. I shoved my guidebook back into my bag before walking up to the counter, not wanting to appear like some neophyte which I was, unfortunately. But nothing wrong about keeping that to myself, don't you think? "Mornin', Sleeping Beauty." The diner's owner greeted me in his usual booming voice, and I made a face as I slid into the high-backed stool and hung my tote bag on one of the hooks under the counter. "Very funny, Mr. P." P stood for Pan, as in the famed satyr from the Greek myths. His human form was a large, mustached man with moss-green eyes, dressed perpetually with a chef's hat and apron over his striped shirt and pants. Nix, one of the diner's regular waitresses, once told me that both the chef's hat and apron were spell-protected. The former was to keep his horns away from sight, and no amount of head-shaking would ever dislodge the hat off his temple. The latter, on the other hand, was a magical armor, just in case Mr. P had to protect his diners from supernatural trouble. He was a nice man, really, but he'd be much nicer in my opinion if he would stop reminding me of the first time I had come to his diner. I had just moved into Silver Mist that day, and I had been so tired arranging furniture that I had found myself falling asleep in one of his booths. And I might have snored once. Well, okay, twice, but it wasn't polite to count. "So what are you having?" Mr. P's gaze slanted towards the man seated beside me as he spoke. "Want him, for instance," the owner mouthed with a wink that had me choking and hastily shaking my head. "Just the usual." Picking the menu on the counter, I casually lifted it to hide my face from Mr. Handsome so I could glower at the satyr without being seen. That was another not-so-nice habit of Mr. P. He had sort of guessed about my embarrassing crush at Mr. Handsome, and he loved to torture me about it every once in a while. The ancient satyr looked like he was in the mood to prolong my torment with more irreverent winking, but one of the other diners called out to him then, and I breathed a sigh of relief as Mr. P bustled off. I stole a look at the man seated beside me. His concentration remained fixed on the sheaf of papers he held in his hand, and I found myself releasing another inner sigh. I had taken to calling him Mr. Handsome for good reason, believe me. His look strongly reminded me of Robert Redford in his younger days, think barefoot in the park, with his thick blonde hair, chiseled features, and tall, lithe frame that was as elegant as it was powerful. Add to that his unmistakable air of mystery, and can anyone blame me for being just a little obsessed? You see, everyone in town was either non-human, like Pan, or a human, like me, employed by the former, and majority of the local men of Silver Mist were either small business owners, non-human, or daily commuters with blue-collar jobs, human, at the city. Most of the time, it was easy to figure out who was which, with the glaring exception of Mr. Handsome, who fit neither bill. He kept mostly to himself unlike the other locals, and I only ever see him talking to Mr. P. There were also other ways he stood out, such as his penchant for beautiful, tailored suits, for instance, Savile Row, not Italian, and the irregular times he would drop by the diner. Thanks to Mr. P, everyone working at Panda's diner also knew about my ridiculous infatuation, and most of the staff had taken to sending me real-time photos of Mr. Handsome whenever he dropped by. 4 a.m. on a Tuesday, 1 p.m. on a Wednesday, and even 11 p.m. on a Sunday, which was unheard of for the respectable, hard-working townsfolk of Silver Mist. What kind of work could one possibly do to have so much flexibility with his schedule? It was possible, of course, that he was simply a man of leisure, but I didn't think so. There was the state of his hands, you see. I'm a great believer of a person's hand saying a lot of things about its owner. It's probably why CSI had placed me in the palmistry training protocol, and Mr. Handsome's hands certainly said a lot about him. Prior to moving to Silver Mist, I used to be one of your run-of-the-mill, overworked, and underpaid workers trapped in a concrete jungle in California. Office guys were a dime and a dozen back in those days, and trust me when I say that none of them had hands like Mr. Handsome's. Those guys had weak-looking hands and manicured nails, hands that looked like the most physical thing they did was carry a cardboard tray of Starbucks coffee every time they needed to buy their way into their superior's good graces. Mr. Handsome's hands, though, they were large, rough, and calloused, the kind that men who knew what real work meant would have. Was he that type of man? I suppose I could just ask him, but... "Morning, Blair," Nix sang out as she emerged from the kitchen. Tall and slender, the younger girl was at that rebellious stage in her life where she equated hair color to an assertion of her individuality. Last week's color had been ash gray. This week's was cotton candy pink. "You look beautiful as always," Nix gushed as she reached me. "Nix." My voice was half pleading, half hissing. I'm not sure how I managed it, but I did. I loved that she and Mr. P were trying so hard to get Mr. Handsome to notice me, but at this point he would have to be an idiot not to know what was happening. Nix's eyebrows shot up in feigned surprise. "But you do look beautiful. Honestly, I can't believe you've been living here for over a month." "Oh no. And you're still single," the younger girl finished triumphantly. "Cast it." Nix's eyes danced with mischief as she cocked her head towards Mr. Handsome's direction. I shook her head. No way was I looking at him after what she said. She cocked her head towards him again, more insistently this time. "Look. Oh, River of Lethe, here goes nothing." I slowly turned Mr. Handsome's way. Magnetic hazel eyes collided with mine, and I quickly snapped my head back. As mortifying as it was to admit, having our gazes meet was already more excitement than I could handle. My breath had locked in my throat as my heart rate picked up speed. "For Chrono's sake, Blair, please act your age. Here's your order, by the way." Nix placed a steaming hot plate before me. It was Panda's breakfast special, Sunnyside UPS, bacon, buttered toast, and a healthy serving of Mr. P's homemade potato salad. Normally, the sight of it was enough to bring a smile to my face, but right now I had a nasty feeling I might not even manage a single bite. I could still feel Mr. Handsome's gaze on me, and I wondered glumly if Nix's words had him realizing how plain I was. Maybe he even thought I was unattractive. I couldn't blame him if he did. I knew I wasn't hideous or anything, but I also knew my features were far from eye-catching. Wavy dark brown hair I always kept tied up in a bun, the same shade of eyes, skin so fair I could easily get lost in a white background, curves that had never left me since I hit puberty. And, oh, did I mention I was kinda on the short side, too? Honestly, the only thing I had going for me was my love for clothes. Today's outfit was a loose floral dress in shades of blue and gray, black tights, and a pair of leather Oxfords. If I had to put it in words, I suppose it would be that I had an instinct for knowing what looked good, and it was a talent I found quite handy, considering how little I could afford to spend on my wardrobe. "Enjoy," Nix was saying. "And if you want another pair of toast like you usually..." No, this is fine," I cut the younger girl off hastily before she could say more. It wasn't that I was ashamed of how much I ate, nothing wrong with a healthy appetite, you know, but I'd also rather not have my love for carbs be one of the first things Mr. Handsome knew about me. Nix left with a cheerful wave after pouring coffee into my mug, and I did my best to ignore Mr. Handsome's piercing stare as I took out my textbook. I wasn't actually in the mood to study, but I needed something to look at while I struggled to regain my composure. Placing the copiously bookmarked hardback on the counter, I absently started flipping through it while taking a bite of my toast. It had the words Level 1, spells and brews emblazoned in pretty big letters on its dust jacket, but I wasn't worried about anyone catching a glimpse of it. All of my books from CSI were spell protected, and unless they were on the agency's to see list, both supernaturals and immortals would see the same thing humans did, a dusty, obscure economics manual published the first year Adam Smith started talking about modern capitalism. 30 minutes later, and I found myself gaping at my empty plate in surprise. I had actually ended up so engrossed with this week's reading material I had finished my breakfast without even realizing it. I had even forgotten all about Mr. Handsome of all things. Struck by a sudden urge to have another look at him, I casually reached for my coffee, hoping to peek at him over the rim of my mug. Thunder like no other suddenly roared outside the diner, and I jerked involuntarily. My hand rattled, and coffee spilled on the open pages of my textbook. Brooms and sticks. As I hurriedly pulled out a couple of tissue sheets from the holder, I missed the way Mr. Handsome frowned when he glanced at my book. By the time I turned around, Mr. Handsome had a charmingly polite smile on his face. "May I help?" His voice was deep but gentle. It was my first time to hear him speak, and it had me stammering like a ninny. "It's fine." I secant, my voice trailed off as Mr. Handsome pried the sheet of tissue from my hands and mopped the stain on my page. After, he ran his fingers on the wet, dark spot, and when he lifted his fingers the page was completely dry and stain-free. I blinked. Wow. I was genuinely spellbound. I had seen other witches perform similar tricks, but never with the same ease and speed that Mr. Handsome had displayed. "It's a fairly simple spell," Mr. Handsome murmured. "I could teach it to you if you like." Before I could even think of what I wanted to say, he had already reached for my hand, and the impact of his touch was, for lack of a better word, incredible. 1,000 sensations bombarded my body: a shock, thrill, excitement, fear, anticipation. I simply felt too much, and I kept feeling more as Mr. Handsome slowly guided my hand into repeating the necessary strokes for the spell. I did my best to memorize them, but it was impossible. Every second of having his fingers hold mine had secret parts of my body trembling in acute awareness. In the end, all I could do was focus on keeping myself from fainting. "Easy, right?" He let go of my hand, and I didn't know whether I felt relieved or sad that he was no longer touching me. It still seemed so surreal, and my senses had yet to recover from the fact that Mr. Handsome's hand had held mine in the first place. With enough practice, he told me, it should be doable for a level 1. I started to nod and thank him when I realized what he had just said. My gaze flew to his, but he only smiled at my obvious surprise. "How did you know I'm a level 1? I questioned uncertainly. "Because your book says so." My jaw dropped. I had suspected that might be it, but having him confirm my thoughts was still a different thing altogether. If he could get past an agency-executed spell, then did that mean he was also working for the government? His lips suddenly twitched. "You didn't think I could read it, did you?" My shoulders lifted in a helpless shrug. "I have no idea what to think about you." I hated how boring my answer was, but I was such a bad liar it was useless to even try. "If it's any consolation," he murmured, "I also think you're a bit of an enigma yourself." I was. His smile turned faintly apologetic. "I didn't expect you to be working for CSI. I'd never have imagined you the crime-fighting type." "That's because I'm not," I answered somewhat guiltily. Crime-fighting sounded so violent, and I had always been more of a pacifist, the kind that insisted on seeing half-full glasses even if there was only less than an ounce left. When I got recruited, I only signed up for local misdemeanors. Missing cauldrons, vandal spells, things like that. I nodded. "I know most people find it boring, but you enjoy it," he concluded. "Don't you?" "I've lived 26 years of my life without magic, so everything still feels so new and exciting." "I know it's silly," I confessed, "but I'm always looking forward to every case assigned to me. No matter how minor." "No matter how minor," I affirmed firmly. "There's actually a running joke in HQ. They say I'm the only agent who'd cry at being given a day off." I stopped speaking. "Oh, cast it." I just realized I had allowed my mouth to run away from me. Mr. Handsome, however, didn't seem to notice anything out of the ordinary, and he reclaimed the reins of our conversation with the enviable ease of a practiced charmer. He asked me about my level 1 lessons and whether I found it easy or difficult. I had the most shameful urge to lie, but in the end, I simply opened my book to a random page and let him see the humiliating truth with his own eyes. The page I had opened to was heavily underscored with neon highlighters, and the margins on both pages filled with my scribbles. "Be honest, please. Does this say passionate about work or desperate to pass level 1 exams so I won't be the only neophyte witch in the agency?" Mr. Handsome grinned. "It's that bad." "Well, considering how my instructor asked me to start saving money so I could afford an expensive offering to Athena, what do you think? Extremely bad, he answered right away with a grin. I grinned back of course, all the while thinking that I couldn't remember feeling any happier. Oh, be still, my bewitched heart. It suddenly occurred to me that we had been talking for some time without having even exchanged names, and I took a deep breath, wondering if I could find the courage to ask for his first. I opened my mouth, but before I could say another word, lightning flashed outside the diner, followed by the power going out. Another second passed, and my phone started playing the theme song of Mission Impossible. Oh, dear. This was not good. Chapter 2. Although CSI in the non-human world functioned as a crime scene investigation unit as well, the letters actually stood for Circe Security Initiative. While history mostly remembered Circe for her failed attempt in seducing Odysseus to become her lover, there was little mention of the kind of life the world's first self-taught witch led afterwards. This was unfortunate since Circe's accomplishments following her doomed romance were as great as any other Greek hero. Sick and tired of being painted as the villainous almost adulteress, Circe had devoted herself to aiding Thebe in her quest for justice, and her subsequent acts of valor were such that the Titan goddess later on granted Circe immense fortune and a taste of ambrosia. Circe could have been a happily retired immortal after that, but instead she had chosen to spend her extended lease on life training special humans to become self-taught witches like her. Through it Circe had eventually found her renewed purpose, and thus CSI was born. The agency's recruitment process varied from case to case, and with mine it had started with an email and a hologram of Circe popping up in my living room. It had taken a while, but the self-made goddess had patiently waited for me to finish freaking out before launching into her be a crime-solving witch pitch. Only 1% of the human population has the ability to be a self-taught witch, Circe had explained among other things, and this mainly boils down to how much faith the person has in magic rather than mere skills. She had beamed at me then, saying, "It's how you've made the cut." Naturally, she had also included a caveat, warning me that if I were to accept her job offer at CSI I would have to leave my life in California and move to Silver Mist. In return, however, I would have my own home, above-average wages with the possibility of earning performance bonuses, and, best of all, I would have magic in my life. When Circe had finished with her spiel, I had looked at her while thinking about the choice she was asking me to make, my present life, which was the definition of purposeless mediocrity, and the other life she offered, which was full of the most exciting and magical possibilities. What do you say then, Blair? I had only one answer to that. Can I start packing now? Division offices of all supernatural crime agencies in the area were housed in one of Silver Mist's historic buildings, a 3-story all-white structure with elegant Palladian windows, coins, and a quietly impressive portico. Prior to the Civil War, it had served as the town's post office. Today, it was listed as headquarters of the privately funded Silver Mist Heritage Society, and as far as humans were concerned, SMHS was the company paying for my wages. That much was true, I suppose, but as for my official job position as field researcher, yes, well, I suppose that could be true, too, as long as no one asked too many questions about the nature of my research. The downpour of rain lashing the streets of Silver Mist had erupted into a full-blown thunderstorm when I finally made it past SMHS double doors. By this time, I also looked like I had gone into the shower fully clothed, with my umbrella having given up on me halfway. "Good morning, Blair." Mary Lou, the pretty, dark-haired tree nymph working behind the reception counter, gave me a sympathetic smile as I struggled to shove my umbrella into the garbage bin, its canopy turned inside out thanks to all of the huffing and puffing the wind gods had done under Zeus' command. "It's crazy out there," I said between chattering teeth as I turned to face her, having finally emerged the victor in my fight against my retired umbrella. I was about to ask Mary Lou if the electricity was back on or CSI was running on backup power when the doors behind me opened again. Swoosh! And I found myself flying across the lobby. Oops. The sickly sweet voice was unfortunately familiar, and by the time I picked myself, I wasn't at all surprised to find Roseanne's lovely face sporting a false look of regret. "I am so sorry, Blair," the silver-eyed witch gushed. "I didn't see you at all." "Yeah, sure," I thought gloomily. "I'd believe that when harpies crawl." Roseanne Dela Cruz had it for me since day one, and I had no idea why. Someone like her shouldn't even have noticed someone like me. Unlike everyone at CSI, she was a natural-born witch, a direct descendant of Hecate herself. Moreover, she held a high-level position at the CIA, that's Council of Illusory Arts, and yes, it was also the supernatural world's version of the Central Intelligence Agency. Her attention should have been taken up by all-important issues like security on Olympus or the growing threat of demons escaping from the underworld, and definitely with no time left to think of me as a rival in either a personal or professional capacity. Gosh, I still can't get over how tiny you are. And yet for some reason, it's exactly how Roseanne seemed to think of me. I really do wonder what could Circe have seen in you, the CIA agent said with a sigh. You know how body shaming's a huge thing in the human world. Well, in this world, it was all about one's height. Tall was the new normal, and like how all prejudices went, I found it completely unfair. It was not my fault that immortals and supernaturals were all born 5'7" and up. So really, it was their height that was unnatural, not mine, right? Roseanne clucked her tongue. You're making quite a mess, too. She looked meaningfully at the puddle around my feet, an unfortunate result when I had shrugged out of my blazer earlier and squeezed the water out of it. I was still trying to think of a safe, smart-ass reply to Roseanne's words when Dyke, my superior in CSI, went on the PA, and her cuttingly clear voice blasted out of the speakers like a stream of ice. Everyone has 5 minutes to get to their assigned meeting rooms. Anyone who doesn't make it, find another job. Gia Bewitched. It said a lot about Dyke that Roseanne and I didn't even look at each other as we raced up to the second floor and made a mad dash to our meeting rooms, Roseanne taking a right turn to get to CIA while I swerved to the left for CSI. Dyke was one of the Ori, the collective term used for daughters of justice, which they literally were, being offspring of Thebe, and if rumors were true, she was the most powerful among her sisters as well. Considering Dyke's bloodlines and skills in the battlefield, her appointment as head of CSI's New England division, rather than the Mid-Atlantic or the Pacific, didn't make any sense even to a neophyte which like me. Silver Mist might be unique for non-humans making up a whopping 68% of its local population, but surely that couldn't be it alone. It was such an intriguing mystery that over the centuries it had become an urban legend of sorts, with theories ranging from scandalous to downright crazy. Of course, one could have simply gone up and asked Dyke why as well, but since that was likely to involve dying with one's neck being squeezed by the goddess' bare hands, no one had ever been foolish enough to make the attempt. Where a powerful justice-seeking goddess was concerned, some questions in this world were just better left unanswered, and it was also why everyone at the conference room shot up in their seats, backs ramrod straight, the moment Dyke strode inside. Tall, olive-skinned, broad-shouldered and with hair trimmed in a no-nonsense bob, Dyke carried herself like the immortal warrior she was, her aura of strength making her all-too-normal pantsuit and leather clogs feel as intimidating as a suit of armor welded by Hephaestus himself. Good morning, agents. I trust you've all received our text alert. All 20 of us simply nodded, trained by Dyke herself not to bother with the usual yes, ma'am/no, ma'am, which the goddess considered a mere waste of time. And as for the text alert, it had been as to the point as you'd expect it to be, considering Dyke's preference for brevity. Zeus out of control, everyone required to report for duty ASAP. It had me leaving Pandas in a hurry, knowing that our director wasn't the type to use ASAP lightly. I hadn't even any time to explain myself to Mr. Handsome, managing only a quick, profuse apology before dashing out of the diner and straight into the storm. Tension in the air heightened up a notch as the black-haired goddess spared us the briefest of glances. All of you seem to have made it. Good. That was high praise already, considering it was Dyke, and the tension eased, just enough for us to slightly relax against the backs of our seats. At present, we have a Category 3 hurricane in our hands. INTERPOL's confirmed that today's inclement weather is a direct result of Zeus' actions. I drew my breath sharply at Dyke's words, and the look on other agents' faces told me that I wasn't the only one worried about Dyke's revelation. As divine head of the Olympian pantheon, Zeus held dominion over the skies, and him being out of control could mean anything from a repeat of Hurricane Katrina or, even worse, a tsunami devastating even landlocked towns that could have served as temporary refuge for evacuees. The Anemoi is doing their best to mitigate the damage, but the backlash is expectedly severe. The Anemoi referred to the four most powerful wind gods: Boreas, who commanded the north wind, Notus from the south, Zephyrus from the west, and the youngest of them, Eurus, who commanded the east wind. The four-winged immortals had sworn by the river of Styx to obey all of Zeus' orders, and such vows were double-edged swords. Their own bodies had to absorb the damage every time they disobeyed one of the thunder gods' directives. All attempts to interrogate Zeus have been unsuccessful so far. He's locked himself in his battle tower, and all the information Interpol has been able to glean is in your dossier. Dake snapped her fingers, and case folders appeared in front of each of us. Right now, the CIA has all its agents out on the field, and their priority is to rescue humans and protect them in the event this matter escalates. Interpol, on the other hand, has focused their efforts in lending assistance to the Anemoi in whatever way they can. Dake's glance swept over the room. That leaves us, the CSI, to investigate behind the scenes. We need to get to the bottom of this. We need to find out what's making Zeus act out of character. She rose to her feet and gestured towards the doors of the conference room, saying, "Now that you all know what to do," she made a little wave of her hand, and the doors flew open. Dismissed. A moment later, the goddess vanished from view, and noise burst inside the room as everyone started talking. I headed over to my friends, Tristan and Maria, who had been dating each other since their rookie year. "Has this ever happened before?" "Not in the 5 years we've been working for the agency, no," Tristan answered grimly. Maria pointed to my clothes, which were still dripping wet. "Want me to fix that?" I nodded in relief. "If you don't mind." Piece of cake. Maria cast a drying spell, and a few seconds later, I was feeling refreshed and wonderfully dry. Tristan inhaled appreciatively. "Something smells familiar." I rolled my eyes, but I was grinning as I retorted, "Like anyone would believe you don't recognize your girlfriend's shampoo." And now my hair smelled like it, too, a bonus perk of Maria's spell. Tristan laughed and tugged a lock of his girlfriend's hair, admitting easily, "It's my favorite scent in the world." "Do you mean that?" Maria teased. The way they looked at each other was my cue to leave, and I cleared my throat and said, "Thanks again, guys." But as expected, the other girl didn't even seem to hear me. The couple might be top-notch level 5 agents, but I had also been around the pair long enough to know that they liked spending the first few minutes of the day flirting before getting down to business. Spinning around on my heel, I flipped my case folder open on my way to my cubicle and began thumbing through the dossier Dike had provided. With Zeus locking himself away and Olympus being a strictly immortals-only zone, there was no way for any CSI agent to hope for more information beyond what our case file provided. If we wanted more clues, we were only limited to those of this world, and we had to unearth them, pun intended, on our own. When I reached my workstation, I detached the photos from the folder and started pinning them one by one to my corkboard. The first set of photos was of Olympus, and they were as majestic as I remembered from previous case files, with its towering all-white columns that seemed to reach all the way up to the Earth's stratosphere. The second set consisted of photos of Zeus as taken by the Olympian's resident doctor, the once mortal Hippocrates, just a few hours before the thunder god had started exhibiting strange behavior. A headache with still unknown cause, medical reports already with NSA. Dark longish hair and bearded with soulful blue eyes, the thunder god reminded me of the sad Keanu meme that had gone viral a few years back. Too handsome for his own good, I couldn't help thinking. Many deaths among immortals could have been so easily prevented if Zeus had simply remained loyal to his fate's chosen wife Hera. I studied the photos one at a time, trying to find something, anything, that shouldn't be in them. Nothing jumped out, and so I decided to print photos of Olympus and Zeus from a previous case. I compared the two sets to each other. Everything was in the exact place, everything was the same, except... Why did Zeus' hands seem to sparkle in the newer set of photos? It was as if his hands were sprinkled with gold dust. Chapter 3. Pandas was still bursting in the seams when I returned. It was a few minutes past 6 in the evening, and with the power still out, most of Silver Mist's locals had decided to take advantage of the only place in town with electricity. No vacant seats on the counter, no empty chairs or anything, and the noise level was 10 times louder than usual, like people inside were trying to drown out the sound of rain and thunder. Nevertheless, there was a strong sense of togetherness in the air, and it made me cast a wishful look on my surroundings, thinking that this was one of the reasons why I had really looked forward to moving to Silver Mist. It was easy to drown in anonymity when living in the city, and that was what had exactly happened to me in California. It was also what I hoped to change by moving to a small town, and Silver Mist had certainly been more I could ever hoped for. I was a real person here, and I got to enjoy real conversations and real friendships with other real persons. Hello again. My heart skipped a beat at the familiar voice, and when I turned around it was exactly as I had feared and hoped at the same time. It was Mr. Handsome, this time with an elegant gray overcoat thrown over his suit, and the golden locks of his hair slightly wet. The sight made me want to run my hands through it, and the urge was so strong I found myself hastily clasping my hands behind my back. Hey, I stopped and verbally floundered, remembering too late we hadn't been able to exchange names. The corners of his lips curved up. It's Paul Theodore. Paul. His name was Paul. A simple, traditional name, and it suited him. Returning his smile with a tentative one of my own, I tried my best to keep my voice steady as I introduced myself. I'm, Blair. His grin widened, and I stopped speaking. Oh, cast it. Not him, too. Your name is really Blair. Don't say it, I pleaded. And you're training to be a full-fledged witch, he finished with a chuckle. Ha. 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 I made a face as Paul's broad shoulders rocked in silent mirth. I'm sorry, Blair. But you must admit, it is amusing. Not when it's the 1692nd time you've heard the joke, I retorted, and every time it's at my expense. 1692, he echoed incredulously, and his grin widened. 1692 is the year the Salem witch trials began. I cut him off with another groan, and Paul laughed yet again as my face flamed at the realization of what my subconscious had made me do. I'm sorry. It must be my hunger acting up. I haven't had lunch. That's not good, he said with a quick frown. Let's get you fed. Oh, but I'm just here for a quick bite, I protested, worried that he'd think I had been angling for a date. I still need to head out of town after. Paul arched a brow, asking, a date? No. The denial came out a little more heartfelt than I wanted, and when I saw Paul's lips curve into an amused smile, I could only cringe internally while hoping for the floor to swallow me up. 26, Blair. Start acting like you're 26, and not an 8-year-old with your first schoolgirl crush. Clearing my throat, I said, it's for work. New case for CSI. I didn't answer right away. Earlier, I had been too flustered by finally getting to talk to him that I hadn't remembered to ask him any questions. But now that I was just a little less dazzled, if he had been able to see past the agency's spell to recognize my CSI manual, what did that make him? You're suspicious of me, Paul observed in amusement. I didn't smile back. His perceptiveness, as well as his bluntness, was disconcerting, but when I shot him a guarded look, it only had his lips pressing in a straight line, like he was having a hard time not laughing. Paul nodded towards the counter, where a red-faced Mr. P was bellowing orders to his kitchen. You've known Pan for a long time, haven't you? I nodded warily. And do you trust him? I do. Every neophyte had an undercover CIA agent assigned to him or her in case of emergency requests, and that was Mr. P for me. Then if Pan vouches for me, you will trust me, too, yes? Paul didn't wait for an answer, and his long-legged stride had him reaching the counter in a few moments. I watched him speak to the diner's owner, his commanding height allowing him to stand toe-to-toe with the satyr even with his chef's hat on. So what did that make him, I wondered absently. 6'3". 6'4". When Paul returned to my side, Nix was with him, and the younger girl was wearing her usual mischievous smile. Hey, Blair. Pan asked that I take the two of you to the private room. Her smile widened at my visible bemusement. So if you'd follow me, please. But I didn't really have a choice, with Nyx already curling an arm around mine as she dragged me with her. Since when did pandas have a private room? I asked under my breath. I had been eating here almost every day since moving into town, and the diner wasn't that large a place I could have missed noticing an extra room. From the very start, was Nyx's cheerful reply. Now, your turn. Are you and our regular mystery guy dating now, Nyx? I almost tripped on my feet. We are not dating. Then he must be into you at least. Nyx's tone was gleeful. Why else would he ask to have dinner with you at the private room? I shook my head stubbornly even as my stupid bewitched heart skipped another beat at Nyx's words. Could it be true? Was it possible that? Wait a minute. I stopped dead in my tracks and forced Nyx to a halt beside me when I realized where she was taking us. Why are we here? She had taken us to the far end of the diner, straight to the narrow hallway that led to the diner's restrooms. Relax, Blair. This is where the private room is. She glanced at Paul over her shoulder. Shall you do the honors, sir? Certainly, milady. Paul's gallant drawl perfectly matched Nyx's tone, but I wasn't impressed. I had a feeling both of them were having fun at my expense. Paul walked past us to rap his fist on the wall thrice, and a gasp escaped me as a second later, an arched doorway appeared in front of us, revealing a cozy but elegant French country dining space with red stucco walls and limestone flooring. A crystal chandelier hung over a two-seater table, and across it was a fireplace, with its crackling fire adding an almost musical element to the air. Walking back, Paul offered me his arm, and Nyx relinquished her hold with flourish, saying with mock seriousness, "Please take care of milady, sir." Oh, for Chrono's sake. But I was laughing and breathless as Paul winked at me before giving Nyx his assurance in a deep, solemn voice. Paul placed my hand on his arm, and my heart skipped a beat at the heat of his touch. I cast another look at our surroundings as he walked us to the table. Every inch of this place was wonderfully romantic, and I could see why it would lead Nyx into thinking Paul was interested in me. As Paul and I took our seats, Nyx gestured to the wall-mounted chalkboard facing our table and told us about its spell-activated properties. This is an interactive display, so speak to it as you would with a regular server. You could ask for the menu, for instance, and you'll see our regular items and private room specials on the board. As she spoke, the diner's menu flashed on the board in beautiful, cursive handwriting. You can also have the board double up as a window. The text vanished, and a steel-framed arch window appeared in replacement to reveal the outside world, with its overcast skies and endless rain. Lastly, just click on the board, and it should work as a buzzer. One of the staff will come in to assist you with whatever you need. I think that covers it, so, Nyx stepped back with a smile. Enjoy your dinner. As she started to turn away, the younger girl caught my eye. Oh no, and winked. Really, Nyx? Really? I stole a look at Paul's gorgeous face as the walls closed behind Nyx's retreating form, and the grin on his lips made me want to die in embarrassment. If not for Nyx suggesting that Paul could be interested in me, I'd probably have left a long time ago. Pan and Nyx were being so shamelessly obvious about everything, they might as well have the word "she has a crush on you" stamped on my forehead. Paul requested for the menu, and text once again started filling up the chalkboard. Both of us ordered for steak and fries, and both of us requested for the steak to be medium rare. For a moment, we stared at each other in surprise. And then Paul said dryly, "If you're going to say you also like your steak with coffee." My jaw dropped. That was what I was going to order, and I didn't care a bit that convention dictated wine being the better pairing for steak. Seriously? Paul asked with a chuckle. Coffee is my go-to beverage for everything, I confessed sheepishly. That's too adorable. It was Pan who spoke, with his voice booming out from the chalkboard, and its tongue-in-cheek tone had me turning red and wanting to shrink in my seat. All of your orders are a perfect match and you didn't even plan it. If I didn't know better, I'd think you two were a match made in the Olympus. Mr. P. But Paul only laughed, asking in a good-natured tone, "Who knows?" As Paul and the satyr discussed our options for dessert, I struggled to keep myself still while my mind went overboard. Who knows? What did he mean, who knows? He was just flirting, right? Blair. I looked up to see Paul gazing questioningly at me as Mr. P disappeared from view, and the chalkboard turned back into a window display. You look worried. Anything wrong? Nothing much, except for Mr. P's lack of subtlety. It was excruciating to say the words, but it seemed stupid to pretend ignorance at this point. The old man means well, he said gently. Which meant exactly, what? I gazed at him with a touch of frustration, thinking that he turned being mysterious into an art form. He was just so good at it. He never seemed to be lying to me, but he never seemed to tell me anything he didn't want me to know either. Have I made you mad? Paul's softly spoken question startled me out of my thoughts, and I stammered, excuse me. You've been frowning at me for the past 30 seconds, he informed me. My face flamed. I'm so sorry. Have I done something wrong? I shook my head emphatically. No, of course not. Then what were you thinking of? Nothing really. It was something about me, wasn't it? I couldn't help but fidget in my seat. How did he know these things? Blair. The low, persuasive note in his voice was undoing, and I said reluctantly, I was just thinking about how mysterious you still seem to me. Ah. Paul leaned back against his seat. Is that all? Yes. I felt like fidgeting even more now, with the way a half-smile started to play on his lips. Ask me what you wish then, he invited. I gave him a wary glance. I can ask you anything, really, anything. Then, I took a deep breath. What do you do for work? Are you CSI? CAA? NSA? How were you able to? I broke off when the smile playing on his lips turned into a smirk. I should have known you'd ask about that of all things. You said I could ask you anything, I said defensively. If he was expecting me to flirt, then he was doomed for disappointment. I did, didn't I? His fingers moved as he spoke, and I found myself gaping as he conjured a plain black card out of thin air. He offered it to me, and as soon as my fingers touched its surface, gold-embossed letters randomly started to appear. PRONELIT. My brows furrowed. How do you read this? Pronlit. PR1 lit. Humor gleamed in his eyes. Tap it again. I did as asked, and a tiny gasp escaped me as the letter started rearranging itself. INT. Oh, my goodness. Paul was an Interpol agent. Chapter 4. When one spoke of the greatest conspiracies of all time, most people thought of JFK's assassination and Elvis Presley's death, Roswell and Roanoke, and more recently, the much-talked-about Illuminati. All of these, however, paled in comparison to the secret that the likes of Homer, Dante, and even Shakespeare carried to their graves. The immortals of Greek mythology were real, and Olympus was the gateway to heaven. While supernatural agencies like CIA and CSI were concerned about human protection, Interpol had another objective entirely, and that was to defend the home of Olympians. Interpol stood for the interdisciplinary phalanx of Olympus, and consisted of the most powerful immortals and supernaturals. For Paul to be a part of such an organization. Now I know why you always look like a blonde James Bond, I exclaimed unthinkingly. Paul threw his head back with a laugh, and my face flamed as I realized just how silly my first thought was. Why did I always end up acting like an idiot where this man was concerned? Dinner should have been intensely awkward after that, but thankfully Mr. Interpol detective was too skilled a conversationalist to let it happen. As we worked our way through Mr. P's perfectly grilled steaks, Paul left me no chance to feel self-conscious as he swiftly engaged me in shop talk. Officially speaking, Interpol agents have been instructed to inform the public that Zeus is only having a temporary mood swing, and so it's nothing to panic about. I choked. A mood swing that can potentially lead to a Category 4 hurricane isn't something to panic about. Paul grimaced. I understand why you might find that incredulous, but right now, it's the best we can do to prevent mass hysteria. We didn't want anyone panicking unnecessarily, and remember the last time Zeus unleashed his full wrath. Oh. I hadn't thought of that at all. Paul was talking about the last great war that the gods fought and eventually won. Theirs was a Pyrrhic victory, though, since the recapture of demons came at the expense of the dinosaurs' global extinction. Can it really get that bad? I asked uneasily. Worse, Paul said grimly, since this time Zeus will be on the enemy's side. He leaned back against his chair, and his gaze turned contemplative as he looked at me. You mentioned earlier that you were heading out of town. I'm assuming it's related to Zeus' case. Yes. I told him about the photos included in my case file, and how one particular thing stood out in all of them when compared to older photos of the thunder god. You're sure about the gold dust? Paul asked. It would be ideal if I could confirm this in person, but since I'm not allowed on the Olympus, I'm just relying on my guts. I held my breath then asked, you know what it could mean, right? Paul's lips twisted into a smile. I can't think of any self-respecting immortal who wouldn't. Oh, thank Gia. I did get it right then. My body relaxing in relief, I asked, which of Midas' casinos do you think Zeus would have visited? Although Midas' golden touch hadn't disappeared throughout the centuries, it had certainly tarnished over the years. Unlike his palaces of old, his modern-day casinos could only boast of gold-plated scrolls adorning the ceiling's plasterwork. Fake gold was all around us, and if the grapevine was to be believed, his reduced powers were the result of Apollo's divine punishment. I asked Paul if he knew what the Phrygian king could have done to earn the Olympians' wrath, but before he could answer, the doors to the Golden Court had already opened, and a woman in a glittering gown was welcoming us inside. I could tell she was a naiad just by her scent alone. She smelled of fresh water the way Mary Lou at reception bore the scent of forests. Like all nymphs working for Midas, Adriana earned her keep by luring men in and sweet-talking them into spending their fortune on the tables. Unfortunately for Adriana, Paul was no gullible mortal, and so the tables, pun intended, were turned, with all of the women in the casino falling under the immortal's thrall. I guess that took care of the women, but what about? Oh, Paul had chosen one of the roulette tables to play in and right away won his first bet. A small crowd of men immediately swarmed around him, cheering, and its size more than doubled when Paul declared he was sharing his winnings with his loudly supportive fans. Right. With all eyes on the handsome detective, I quietly slipped away and headed straight to the back of the VIP area, where the security room was. There were several armed men inside, but thankfully they were all mortals, and so all it took was a quick aerial illustration of a spell symbol using my CSA-issued wand and all 5 men fell to the floor, fast asleep and snoring. Since witches in training like me couldn't yet cast spells on our own, we had to rely on agency standard tools to perform magic on the job. These tools were pretty efficient and easy to use, but the downside was that they also came with a limited time effect. And right now I had just about 15 minutes before the guards woke up. After connecting my phone to the casino security system, I quickly made a call to Lana Spears, my agency-assigned partner in tech support. I'm in. Understood. I'll be as quick as I can. CSI might be a supernatural agency, but it didn't mean we couldn't rely on human technology if we had to. Anything that could be useful would be used, and in this case I needed to have Lana hack into the casino system so she could do her own kind of magic. And yes, we did have to hack it since Midas was notorious for being uncooperative when it came to any kind of supernatural investigation. This, too, supposedly had something to do with Apollo, but the rumors had always been pretty vague and inconsistent when it came to actual details about their row. I have confirmation, Lana said 10 minutes later. I heard a series of quick taps on her keyboard, and a video file showed up on my phone. I clicked on the file, and I saw Zeus seated on one of the casino's baccarat tables and surrounded by cheering onlookers. As he leaned forward to reach for his winnings, I saw a pretty brunette edge her way to the front of the crowd. There. She had slipped something in his drink, and when Zeus turned to her, she murmured something to him that made the thunder god laugh heartily. He kissed her full on the mouth just before reaching for his glass and taking a swig. Cast it. I had just seen a woman successfully attempt to poison or brainwash the head of the Olympian pantheon, and I could only shudder in fear as I thought of what that person hoped to achieve. Paul already had his car running by the time I snuck out of the casino. I hurried to it as fast as I could, but I still ended up wet and shivering like a drowned little mouse when I finally got into the passenger seat. Zeus' so-called mood swings had gotten worse in the past hour, and the sound of every raindrop striking the ground reminded me of a ticking bomb. Sorry for getting your car wet. I glanced down at my wet clothes and almost gasped. My blouse was completely soaked and see-through, revealing the cotton cups of my bra. My head shot up, and my embarrassed gaze flew to Paul. I saw his hazel eyes dip down, and my throat tightened. Oh, Gia bewitched. That look could only be interpreted in one way. Paul Theodore was interested in me. Chapter 5. What did you find out? Paul's voice was gentle and calm, and his hold on the steering wheel was relaxed. Both went a long way in helping me pretend that the embarrassing little episode 10 minutes ago didn't actually happen. I was completely dry now, thanks to Paul's magic, and although I had to clear my throat a few times, I was able to answer him in a voice almost as steady as his. Lana's already running an ID check on the woman's photo, I told him. She's promised to call me as soon as she gets results, and I also forwarded you a copy of the video in case your agency finds something first. Thank you, Blair. The warm, approving glow in his hazel eyes made me feel breathless, excited, strange, and I muttered awkwardly, I'm sure any other detective at Interpol could have done the same thing. That's where you're wrong. Most other Interpol officers wouldn't even have made it past the entrance. I don't think so. I was genuinely skeptical. I'm just a level 1 agent. Exactly, Paul said simply. All of Midas' casinos are for humans, and his security's trained to keep high-level subs out of his hair. He doesn't want any non-human interfering in the way he runs his business. But you managed to get in, I pointed out. I'm better at disguising my powers than most are. Paul turned the radio on after speaking, and I mentally dissected his words while keeping one ear out for the news. Was he able to disguise his powers by using a shield, which was a terribly expensive spell, or had he simply drawn everyone under his thrall, a natural-born ability that only immortals possessed? And now, for this hour's breaking news. The familiar sound of the messenger goddess voice had me sitting up while Paul tapped on his radio's digital display to increase the volume. No definite timetable for how long the mood swings would last. Heavy flooding has now struck certain parts of New England. Hurricane level may be upgraded to Category 4 if this continues. Paul and I exchanged somber looks at the last piece of news. Category 4 meant that the wind gods were nearing at the end of their tether. We had to find out who that woman was, before Zeus ended up commanding his immortal liegemen to tear the world apart. Paul picked me up at my place at exactly 8 the next morning, dressed impeccably in another dark suit, and with a black umbrella in hand. He had insisted on this last night, telling me with one of his rare wicked smiles that he wasn't the type to take no for an answer. A good number of curtains on neighboring properties twitched tellingly at his arrival, and I was pretty sure I caught sight of Mrs. Murray taking a quick photo of Paul's SUV from her second-floor bedroom window. Good morning. Paul's lips curved into a smile of unabashed appreciation as his gaze took in my unbound hair, long wet strands curling against my back. You look beautiful. It's the clothes, I felt obliged to emphasize even as my cheeks turned pink. I was secretly, and foolishly, glad that I had taken extra effort with today's outfit, a sleeveless lilac sweater worn over a collared lace blouse, a plaid skirt that conservatively fell well below my knees, and black, low-heeled Mary Janes to complete the look. Paul laid a hand at the small of my back as soon as I finished locking the door and pulled me close under his umbrella while walking us to his car. A little too close if you ask me, and I nearly fell into the passenger seat in my haste to put a bit of distance between us. Have you had breakfast yet? Paul inquired as soon as he settled behind the wheel. I was thinking. So that's a no, he interrupted with a grin. We'll make a quick stop at Panda's before I drop you off. I can't be late, I warned even as warmth flooded me at his thoughtfulness. I have a very strict boss. That sounds like Dyke. My eyes widened. She is my superior. Do you know her? Just enough to promise I won't have you late. He was doing it again, I thought in exasperation. Telling me everything without saying a single thing. Paul parked his SUV by the curb and reminded me to lock my doors before making a quick dash to Panda's. I glanced outside my window, and my heart grew heavy at the still darkened skies overhead. I personally loved the rain, and I usually loved the pitter-patter sound it made against the windowpane. This storm, however, was different. I just found it impossible to delight in it, knowing that this was nothing but a result of Zeus' conditioned tampering with nature. Paul returned soon after, and as he handed me my coffee and donut, he noticed the way my brows were furrowed and asked, "What is it?" "I'm just worried about the storm." I knew CIA, INTERPOL, and all the other agencies were doing their best to mitigate the damage, but I also knew that they were only buying humans extra time at best. The only way to solve this was to find a way to cure Zeus out of his mood swings. "Were you able to get anything from the CCTV footage?" I asked Paul as he steered his SUV back to the road. "It was a big help. I meant to tell you first thing but it slipped my mind. Facial recognition couldn't find any match, but my agents had a hit with voice recognition." "How's that possible?" I wondered if he realized he had just let slip how high up he was in hierarchy. "My agents," he had said, like he had a whole squad of them working under him. "Our software was able to detect unnatural qualities in the woman's voice," Paul elaborated. I tried to understand what he was saying. "Is she a banshee?" Such creatures had a distinctly high-pitched scream, and listening to any sound they make for more than 5 seconds was enough to make human ears bleed. "Her voice," he said meaningfully, "was unnaturally perfect." Comprehension dawned. Our poison-administering Jane Doe was a siren. "Does Dyke know?" I asked as he drove the SUV into one of the parking slots in front of my office. "That's what I'm here for." "What?" But Paul had already stepped out of the vehicle, and I could only watch with a sinking feeling in my stomach as he went around to open the door for me. This was not good. "Come on out, Agapolamau." Paul was grinning as he took my hand, leaving me no choice but to let him pull me out of the car. "You don't have to sound so worried." Paul's tone was full of sham innocence. "I promise I won't do anything you could lose your job for." That was good to know, but what I was more concerned about was losing face, and as soon Paul opened the doors to let me in first, I immediately knew I was right to worry. "Oh no." Roseanne was careening straight at me, tottering in her high heels like she was about to lose her balance. Chapter 6. With only a split second to spare, I could only brace for impact. Been there, done that, I thought unhappily while mentally preparing myself for the look of pity I was sure to see on Paul's face. Roseanne did so love throwing her weight around, literally, and she loved apologizing to me even more just so she could add in the end that it wasn't her fault I was so small and skinny. Oh no, no, no. Even with a fake look of horror on her face, Roseanne still looked as lovely as ever. I squeezed my eyes shut, prepared to once again fly across the lobby, but instead I felt one strong arm curving around my waist. Yank! My eyes flew open as Paul hauled me out of Roseanne's way, and my lips parted in silent horror as I watched the other woman screech as she skidded straight into the wall head first like a crazed, raging she-bull. "Kronos, save her." Paul looked down at me, asking blandly, "Is she always that careless?" I had no idea what to say. As much as it pained me to admit this, Paul wasn't the first guy to see how Roseanne loved to bully me. He was, however, the first one to actually do something about it, and while I was pleased about it, I also felt stupid and disappointed, realizing too late that I shouldn't have let Roseanne get away with so much in the first place. "Blair, are you hurt anywhere?" Paul's soft question made me belatedly realize I was still leaning against him like some weak damsel in distress. My self-disgust grew, and I quickly pulled away from him, muttering, "Sorry." His hazel eyes turned thoughtful, but in the end he only nodded, saying politely, "It was nothing." The sound of angry stomping had us both turning around, and we saw Roseanne angrily heading towards our direction, her face an ugly shade of red. I prepared myself to confront her once and for all, but Paul beat me to speaking. "I apologize for the accident." Paul's velvety smooth voice had my eyes widening. Was it just me or was he acting like he could charm Roseanne out of her bad temper? "I hope you weren't terribly hurt." There was a second of silence. And then I heard Roseanne simper, "Oh, it's fine." My head snapped back to him. "It's fine." I once saw an intern accidentally misspell her name in a report, and the CIA agent had ripped into her like the girl had committed murder. And now that very same woman was saying everything was fine even though Paul's quick reflexes had caused her to sport a huge, swelling lump on her forehead. I could only mentally shake my head as Roseanne batted her lashes like a coquettish Victorian throwback while introducing herself to Paul and afterwards gushing at how thrilled she was to meet a skilled detective like him. By the time we headed up to CSI's block of offices, leaving behind a certain CIA agent who was alternately ogling Paul and glaring at me, I was half disbelieving, half suspicious. First, those people in the casino, and now Roseanne. Could it be possible that he was? Paul caught me looking at him frowningly as we reached the top of the stairs. Is there anything wrong? I slowly turned to him with my hands unconsciously settling on my hips like I was a mother about to confront a son who might have done something naughty. Be honest with me, please. Of course. Paul's swift assurance allowed me to relax slightly, and I asked in a rush, who are you, really? I'm certain you didn't use any spell on Roseanne, but... The sound of a door opening cut me off, followed by a familiar, icily pleasant voice. Paul, what a surprise. Dake stepped into view, and I was startled to see an unusually disconcerted expression on her face. My gaze immediately flew to Paul's, but a bland mask of politeness had fallen over his handsome features. Uneasiness skittered down my spine. Something's not adding up, I thought again. I didn't expect to see you here, I heard our division director murmur. I hope you don't mind me dropping by. Paul's voice was smooth. I felt it proper to let you know in person I've been working with one of your agents. Dake's glance slanted towards me. I see. I bit my lip. It did seem like she saw something. But what? A closed-door meeting was held at Paul's request, with our division director taking a seat at the head of the table while Paul took the other end. Also present in the room were Lana, Agent Tamara Grease, who was to represent the CIA, and, well, me. A mistake must have been made, I thought nervously. Lana might be a level 1 like me, but everyone knew she was a tech whiz. She had what it took to be in this room. I didn't. Someone still learning the ropes shouldn't be here, and if I wasn't so scared of my boss, I would have been tempted to ask the daughter of justice if she was certain about having me in the room. It should have been someone else, like Tristan or Maria or even Roseanne, anyone who could actually contribute something to the table. The meeting commenced with Paul providing a succinct summary of the evidence we had uncovered, and as soon as he was done speaking, Dyke asked the Interpol detective what his next step was. With your permission, Paul made a polite gesture towards my direction, murmuring, I'd like to have Agent Vavrin. Dyke started in her seat, the sudden jerking motion drawing everyone's eyes to her. Is something the matter, Director? Paul asked politely. Apologies. Her voice was curt. You were saying about Agent Vavrin. With your permission, I'd like to have her accompany me when I pay a visit to a siren I know. Granted. I almost choked. Just like that. But before I could even figure out how I felt about the way things were progressing, the CIA agent with us was already shaking her head with a frown. No offense to Agent Vavrin, the statuesque brunette gave me an apologetic smile. But wouldn't it better if someone more experienced accompanied Detective Tamara raised a brow at Paul. Paul. Paul's lips curved into a smile. Just Paul. With the exception of Dyke, all of us couldn't help gaping at his blatant evasion. Wasn't that carrying his secretiveness a little too far? It was just his last name, for Chronos' sake. Let him be, my superior said dismissively. Interpol detectives are notoriously suspicious that way. Tamara let out a stiff laugh. Of course. Her tone, however, was patently unconvinced. Dyke turned to Paul. As for Agent Grease's suggestion, it's your call. I'm sure Agent Grease is entirely capable. It was Paul's turn to give the other woman a smile of polite apology. But I must insist on continuing to work with Agent Vavrin for reasons I can't disclose at the moment. Tamara's gaze narrowed. So that's how it is. Paul appeared indifferent to whatever the other agent was insinuating. He swung his chair to face Dyke, asking with laconic ease, Director. Permission was already granted, Dyke answered with a grunt. Turning to the CIA agent, she said abruptly, I appreciate your good intentions, Agent Grease, but with Interpol now involved it's best to let Paul do as he sees fit. Chapter 7. Paul had just taken a left turn at Rainbow Street when I finally broke the silence between us by clearing my throat. So, Paul turned to face me with a knowing look. That wasn't so bad, was it? I made a face, realizing that he had only remained silent in the 10 minutes we had been in the car as a way of teasing me. It was that bad, and you know it. There's no need to torture yourself over anything. Agent Grease should have known better than to try to take over the case that way. But she had a valid point, Paul. And I am worried that you and Dyke made a big mistake in choosing CSI over CIA. I shot him an exasperated look. You know it's not just that. Then what is it? I didn't like the way he was forcing me to spell out things, and I frowned unhappily while watching Paul steer his SUV into a vacant parking space closest to the gates of Silver Mist Park. At about 9:30 on a weekday, the local park was as empty as expected, with only a handful of grandmothers doing Tai Chi next to the playground. They might look harmless in most people's eyes, but I only had to live in this town long enough to recognize our local baddies. And those grandmothers stretching and bending like they were the next Avatar. They were the meanest of the bunch, witches made easily irritable because they had reached the retirement age of 90 and were no longer allowed to ride their brooms in post-daylight hours. I felt for them, really. I could imagine it was like having to obey a curfew even when you were a full-fledged, fully functioning adult. On the other hand, I also didn't think curtailed broom activities made up a valid reason to temporarily transform human boys into frogs just for being rude enough to play loud music at 3 a.m. Paul let out a mock sigh when he saw me shrugging me into my CSA-issued windbreaker and pulling its hood up before letting him help me out of his car. And to think I was looking forward to have us snuggle under an umbrella. I made a face. Not funny. Just remembering the feel of his hand on my back was enough to make me feel faint, and I quickly changed the subject, asking, "Are you really sure it wouldn't be better if you worked with Agent Grease?" I hated the idea of relinquishing a case, but what I hated more than that was the possibility that I could end up hampering everyone's efforts to stop Zeus from destroying the world. We've shared all we know about this case with Agent Grease. That should be enough for her. Paul's tone was one of finality. Now, let's not waste our time talking about her, yes? We still have work to do. He gestured to the park's on-site greenhouse, located on top of a small hill with a winding road leading up to it. That's where Thelxiope lives. Ready to talk to the world's oldest siren. Sirens had it pretty bad compared to most immortals. They weren't gifted with extraordinary strength like the Amazons or blessed with impossibly good looks like the nymphs. They just had really lovely voices, but that didn't mean much these days with the birth of auto-tune. If they wanted to live in this world, they had to work for a living like humans did, and knowing this did have me thinking. Could someone have paid our siren off to poison or brainwash Zeus? Another little-known thing about sirens was that they could also transform into birds, being the offspring of the river god Achilles and a nightingale he had turned into a woman after falling in love with its, well, voice. Hence our local aviary, I thought, which Thelxiope herself owned. She was one of the lucky few, having married a wealthy lumber baron a few hundred years back and had been his sole beneficiary as his widow. She had lived a quiet life since then, with her wealth managed by humans who were paid handsomely not to ask too many questions about her remarkable longevity. As Paul snapped his umbrella close behind me, I could only watch in awed silence as the nightingale with its magenta-streaked wings slowly transformed itself in a shimmery, silver swirl that gradually fell away in layers of silk to reveal a woman whose hair was the same shade as her wings. Thelxiope. Paul bowed his head in respect as the woman stepped out of her larger-than-life cage, built right at the center of the greenhouse. The siren let out a musical laugh as beautiful as a stanza from one of Beethoven's masterpieces. "Oh, my dear boy. You are charmingly old-fashioned as always. I am known as Thelma now, you know." "Thelma it is," Paul agreed smilingly. "And you?" The siren's eyes danced in merriment. "What do you call yourself these days?" "Just Paul," was his easy reply, but with a meaningful look slanted at my direction. I was torn between amusement and exasperation. Can't you at least try to be a little more subtle about the fact you're hiding something from me? My words were half serious, too, but the way both of them laughed made it evident that they were doing anything but take me seriously. Your name, sweet witch. It's, Blair, and how did you know? I stopped speaking. I had to, since Thelma, as it turned out, was no different from the rest. Paul grinned when I made a face at the way Thelma was seized by uncontrollable laughter the moment she realized I was a witch named Blair. Cast that movie. I'm so sorry, the siren said half a minute later as she wiped tears from her eyes. It's just that it's such a delicious irony, you know. Yeah, I said glumly. I do know. Thelma gave my hand a comforting squeeze. Cheer up. It's still a lot better than this other witch I know. There's something worse than being a witch named Blair. Absolutely, the siren said with a mischievous grin. It's called being a witch named Sand. What's so? Oh, I just had to laugh after that. True or not, that was good, and it did make me feel better about my name. Now then, Thelma's tone turned inquiring. To what do I owe the pleasure of your visit? 15 minutes later, and Paul and I were saying our goodbyes to the siren. We didn't have all the answers we needed, but we had enough. Although Thelma hadn't recognized the siren in the photo, she had suggested we ask around at Dion's bars outside town, which nowadays were the only place in state that sirens could find employment. Hours of rain made the downhill road wounding all the way to the park's gates from the greenhouse more slippery, and I found myself letting out a tiny gasp as I lost my footing and started to slip. Gotcha. Paul's strong arm curled around my waist, and I fell against him with a gasp. Sorry. I pulled away quickly, blushing, but instead of letting me go completely he took my hand and placed it on his arm. Hold on to me for now, Paul murmured. Really, it's not necessa. I stopped speaking when Paul suddenly stiffened. A moment later, he had shoved me behind him, the umbrella slipping out of his grip as a single gunshot rang in the air. Chapter 8. Paul. The deafening rain stole the shrill edge of my voice as I clutched Paul's shoulders and turned him to face me, fearing that he might fall to the ground any second. Another gasp slipped past my lips when I saw the bullet he was holding in his hand. What have you, oh my Gia? My gaze swung wildly to his chest, where there was a tiny telltale rip in his shirt, and relief warred with confusion. You were shot, I said blankly, and you're not bleeding. We should go. Paul pocketed the bullet as he spoke, and after grabbing my hand, he had us running back to his SUV, his gaze all the while scanning our surroundings. The shooter? I asked anxiously as soon as he joined me inside and slammed his door shut. Gone, he said in a clipped tone. Paul started the engine and drove away with such speed I was flung back against my seat. I looked out my window in tense silence, dreading and waiting for someone to start shooting at us again. Do you think our Jane Doe did this? My guts say no, but I'm not ruling anything out. He cast a grim look at my direction. Maybe Agent Grease was right. I shot up in my seat with a vehement shake of my head. No, if he had told me that an hour ago, I would have agreed without hesitation. But not now. Not over this. This was our case now, for better or for worse, and it wasn't like I didn't know of the risks associated with my job. Paul shifted gears, driving well past the speed limits now, and I had to bite my lip hard to keep myself instinctively from asking him to slow down. If he could survive a gunshot without bleeding, I was pretty sure he wouldn't be stupid enough to let us get into a car accident. You look like you're in shock. Kinda. I was in shock, but not because someone had shot at us. I stole a look at Paul's shirt. Still no blood. Humans bled. Supernaturals, even the most powerful ones, bled, too. Immortals, however. Paul shot me a concerned look. I think we should have you checked out. I quickly shook my head. I'm fine. Really. And I truly was. I just needed more time to process. I needed more time to accept. Paul was an immortal. My fingers fumbled as I clumsily took my phone out, and I tried to distract myself as I made the necessary calls to report the shooting. By the time we made it back to our place, my heartbeat had considerably slowed down, and I was able to think things through more clearly. Paul was an immortal. Fine. What kind of immortal I could figure out later, but for now it should be enough to know that the detective I was working with might be an immortal. That could only mean good things for our case, and that was all I should care about, right? Do you want to come in? I asked Paul when he insisted on walking me to the door. Only if you need me to. His tone was grim. Do you? Just a little shaken up, I admitted, but it's nothing I can't get over. If you need me for anything, you promise to call me. I promise. I bit my lip after, hesitating, and when Paul raised a brow, I said quietly, I meant what I said earlier. I still want to help with the investigation, and I don't want this to be a reason for you to sideline me out of concern or anything. Paul's lips tightened, and my heart sank at the sight. I knew it. He was thinking of getting me off the case. I can still help, I insisted. I could start asking around. My agents will handle that, Paul rejected. Dion's bars aren't the kind of place you should venture to, and his lips compressed in a straight line. If it's any consolation, both of us will be sitting this one out. It's a long story, but I can't show my face in any of his properties. I gnawed at my lip. That did change things. Paul glanced up at the skies, and I asked nervously, what is it? Zeus' mood is taking a turn for the worse. And did he know that? I wondered, because he was an immortal himself. When the detective turned back to me, his face was grim. I'm not giving you a choice this time. The skies will turn into a war zone tonight. I'm an agent in my own right, I protested. I can help. Not if you're dead, he said quietly. One of the golden rules in this game is knowing how to pick your battles, and tonight isn't your fight. I mean it, Blair. Stay here and don't give me a reason to worry about you. Zeus' so-called mood swing continued to flay the town with whips of rain outside my window. Only an hour had passed since Paul left, and I was already going out of my mind doing nothing. I was CSI, for the love of Gia. I had to do something. Didn't I? Hey, Circe. Good afternoon, Blair. What can I do for you? Circe was the name I chose for the AI assistant I had installed in all of my devices. The app-based assistant was also agency-issued, like my wand, and it could do everything Apple's Siri did, and more, since it had also been developed to provide the necessary assistance for non-humans. Is there any bar owned by Dion that's within walking distance? Let me search that for you. Dion was the name the wine god used these days, and one that humans were very much familiar with. These days, Dionysus had his fingers in just about everything, with his business interests ranging from construction companies to industrial factories and, yes, nightclubs as well. Then again, this wasn't much of a surprise since unlike the other Olympians, Dionysus had always preferred to dwell among mortals. If historic texts were to be believed, Dionysus even felt he had more in common with humans than other gods. They were fallible and prone to excessive emotion, just like him. I chewed on my lip as Circe gave me the location of the bar. Should I call Paul and tell him about my plans? But if I were to do that, wouldn't that make it seem like I had to ask his permission to do my job? At the end of the day, we were still strangers, and besides, he could be busy with work right now. I was only going to visit one bar. What trouble could I get into, right? I switched the radio on and tuned into Iris station while I paced the length of my living room, still undecided. All agencies now on high alert, law enforcers to patrol 24/7 for stray thunderbolts. I switched the radio off, knowing I had no choice now. Stray thunderbolts were a sure sign that Zeus' mood swings had gotten worse, and I had to do whatever I could to get myself closer to the truth. Slippery roads and the need to avoid electrocution-prone areas turned what was supposed to be a 20-minute walk into an hour-long trek. By the time I made it to my destination, I was tired, hungry, and my mood could only be described as dour at best and irritable at worst. A neon signage had the words "The Voice Factor" flashing right above the metal doors, and I could only mentally shake my head while showing my ID to security. Did pesky human issues like a copyright infringement mean nothing to the wine god? And honestly, Did he really have to infringe on, not one but two, voice competition TV shows to give his kitschy karaoke lounge a name? Management cleared my CSI badge after a minute, and security escorted me to the back of the house, where the employees' private quarters were located. I had mentally prepared myself for lodgings that were anything from risque to inhumane, but to my surprise the siren suite of rooms was no different from other cozy homes of silver mist. There were 8 bedrooms in total, its doors arranged in a semicircle around a common living space. A young woman I assumed was one of Dion's employed sirens was seated alone at the couch, and she laughed upon catching sight of my astonished expression. "Were you expecting something dingy?" "Kinda," I admitted. "Something like those awful drug dens busted on TV, actually." "Oh, hon, drugs do nothing for immortals. The only kind of substance we dig is ambrosia, but one taste is enough. Any more and it would literally drive us insane." Swinging her legs off the couch, the siren rose to her feet, saying wryly, "I'm the only one up right now, I'm afraid." She introduced herself as Monica and gestured to the doors surrounding us, adding, "I could wake them up for you, but for the record I want you to know doing so would be a bad idea. Sirens love their sleep, and the only reason I'm up right now is because I skipped work last night." Since I didn't actually have a formal order from my agency that allowed me to insist on questioning, I decided to take her word for it and handed her my card. "I'm Agent Vavrin from CSI." Unlike Interpol's fancy, magical card, our agency's was downright mundane. I had actually asked if I could have my name printed using some nice serif font I was willing to pay out of pocket, but nope. It was Times New Roman or nothing, unfortunately. "I was hoping I could ask you a few questions," I began. "Oh my Gia." Her head jerked up. Did I read this right? The siren gaped at me. "You're a witch named Blair." As I waited for the siren to stop laughing, I comforted myself with the thought that my name would never fail as an effective icebreaker. Questioning the siren took only a few minutes. Not only did Monica claim that she had no idea who my Jane Doe siren was, but she was also certain the siren I was looking for had never worked at TVF. "I've been here since this place opened, and we're one of the smaller ones in Dion's empire. By the looks of her, I think she's probably working for one of Dion's flashier places." By the looks of her. I couldn't help echoing her words curiously. "That low neckline gown she's wearing," Monica explained patiently. "I know we've gotten a really bad rep over the centuries because of how those stupid Greek scholars made us seem like femme fatale, but the truth is, all of those stories are fake. There was this mortal scholar who fell for one of my ancestors, and when she couldn't make herself love him back he decided to get back on her by spreading rumors about us." Monica waved her hand in a vague gesture to our surroundings, saying, "We're an extremely conservative bunch actually, and we prefer to have more clothes on than less. Nothing against dressing sexy, but it's not just our thing, despite what others may think about us. Dion understands this, and that's why he's opened smaller clubs like TVF where we're only expected to sing and entertain guests and nothing else." That woman, on the other hand, the siren tapped on the photo I was holding and gave me an apologetic smile. "She seems more human than siren to me, if you know what I mean." I did, unfortunately, and I found myself mulling over the siren's words as I stepped out of the voice factor and pulled the hood of my jacket back up. I had never thought of comparing humans to supernaturals and immortals before, but if I did or if I had to, I knew my opinion wouldn't be any different from Monica's. My life itself before training as a witch in Silver Mist taught me that humans were all about the material trappings, and some of them were willing to go to appalling lengths for it. Could my Jane Doe be the same? Was all this for the money, even if it meant putting so many innocent lives at risk? I knew I was being naively disappointed about all of this, but I couldn't help it. Roseanne could get annoying at times, but it didn't make her evil. All the other supernaturals and immortals I had met were nice or at least honorable, and none of the cases I had to handle for CSI involved anything more serious than petty theft. I heaved a great sigh as I rounded the corner, miserable at the thought of having to capture a supernatural criminal motivated purely by something as basic as greed. It just wasn't right. A zigzag-shaped thunderbolt suddenly flashed in the sky, its razor-sharp tip heading dangerously close to me. Ah! I jumped out of the way as the bolt struck the ground with a terrifyingly loud zap. A short distance away, no, above me, I heard several frantic voices yelling in the midst of more zapping thunderbolts and the unmistakable whizzing of brooms flying overhead. Agents, I realized faintly. One of the last things I had heard from Iris broadcast was of CIA agents using spells to attract most of the thunderbolts towards our town. Silver missed we had more homes that were magically protected and lower human populations. Our chances of surviving were a lot better compared to other places. The ground suddenly started to tremble, distracting me from my thoughts. An earthquake. I slowly turned around, and that was when my gaze fell on the thunderbolt that had nearly struck me. It was vibrating so hard it seemed about to burst into pieces. What on Gia was happening? The thunderbolt suddenly ripped itself free, and I could only watch in horrified silence as it froze mid-air before bending forward like a bull about to charge towards me. I broke into a run even as my mind struggled to regain its grasp on reality. Not once, in the 100 or so books I had read on Greek myths, had it been mentioned that Zeus' thunderbolts could function as precision-guided missiles that seemed as bloodthirsty and unshakable as one of Ramsay Snow's human-eating hounds. My lungs felt fit to burst as the shouts overhead became more frantic. Lightning flashed, too close for comfort, and I looked over my shoulder just in time to see the thunderbolt gaining ground. I jumped out of its way as the bolt made a frightening lunge towards me. A groan escaped my lips as my back hit the wet, hard ground, and I cried out when I saw my wand slip out of my pocket, leaving me completely defenseless. My body started to roll down the sloping road, fast. I caught a blur of images as pain threatened to take over my consciousness, the thunderbolt once again trying to shake itself free from the earth, the battle-scarred skies, with agents on brooms swooping in all directions as they chased stray bolts. I started to close my eyes when my gaze accidentally clashed with another stray bolt. It jerked to a stop, and my breath caught. The thunderbolt bent towards me, and I thought sickly, Gia, help me. So that was how it chose its target. Everything happened so fast after that, and in the last few seconds I could only seem to absorb snatches of reality, the unstoppable slide of my body as the wet road continued its downward plunge towards the intersection, my hands and knees scraping against the rough asphalt as I tried to change course, my heart thudding against my chest as I realized that I was positioned dead center in the thunderbolt's crosshairs, and finally, the heat. Like a white-hot sun reaching towards you for an electrifying kiss, so hot that I felt it singe the tips of my hair. My lips parted in a scream as I wondered if this was truly the end. And then, darkness, and I opened my eyes to see a shadow eclipsing my view. A moment later, the darkness glided back and I gasped just as the sound of screaming metal rang in my ears. My blurred gaze helplessly followed his every movement. I watched him break the flaming bolt into half with his bare hands, watched the way the thunderbolt's fiery glow died flickering to its last ember in its hold, and finally, just as my injured body stiffened in anticipation and an awful twinge pinched my heart, I watched the way he turned towards me, his own eyes blazing a bright hazel. Paul. Chapter 9. I made you tea. They were not the first words that I had expected Paul to speak, but I was relieved all the same. It was so much better than, I told you so, which I knew I deserved. Less than an hour had passed since Paul had driven me back home. I was now ensconced in my own couch, a thick blanket around my shoulders, and feeling warm and cozy after my hot shower. I watched him pour tea into 2 porcelain cups, every inch the consummate gentleman. He had changed into another suit after his shower, making me wonder just how many of those dark-colored ensembles he had stored in his car. As he turned towards me, I saw the way the slightly wet locks of his hair shone like golden rays under the fluorescent lighting. It was a dazzling sight, and my senses quivered. Mr. Handsome. Home. Shower. It was much too intimate a thought, and I hastily shoved it aside as Paul handed me a steaming cup of chamomile tea. Tea, thanks. I tried to lift the cup to my lips, but it was impossible. My hands had suddenly started shaking, and I stared at them in consternation. I thought I was okay. I should be okay, so why? I heard Paul sigh, and I stiffened when I saw him rise to his feet. It's fine, I said immediately. I can. But Paul only ignored my protest as he scooped me off the couch and took my place, just before depositing me on his lap. Paul. I had never sat on a man's lap. Never. And that the first time would actually happen with Mr. Handsome, of all people. You're still in shock, he said gently. No kidding, I thought dizzily, and my nerves were stretched taut at the feel of Paul's hard warmth against my trembling limbs. This time, I couldn't even try to protest as Paul lifted the cup to my lips. I started to take a sip, but then I saw the steam rising past the rim, and I hesitated. Blair. In the corner of my eye, I saw his lips curve as I blew on my tea several times before letting myself take a tiny sip. It was the right kind of hot, and I sighed in relief as I took a longer sip. When I lifted my head, the first thing I saw was the gleam in his hazel eyes, and my face heated up. What? I couldn't help sounding defensive. He placed the cup back on the table with a shake of his head. It's disconcerting, he admitted wryly, the way you can appear like an innocent child one moment and a fully blossomed woman the next. My cheeks turned a deeper shade of red at his words. You're reading it the wrong way, I muttered even as I let Paul pull me back against him, my head against his chest. I knew I should be doing the opposite, but I was tired of going against what I truly wanted. Just this once, I would do what my heart craved, and that was to be in Paul's arms. Are you saying you never act like a child? Paul asked teasingly. I'm saying I'm human, I grumbled. You hold live thunderbolts in your hands, for Chronos' sake. I won't be surprised if I see you playing with them next time like a majorette twirling her batons. That's a horrible analogy, Paul interrupted with a slight wince. I suddenly had a vision of him wearing a majorette's costume, gold-tasseled shoulder padding and all, and I choked back a laugh. Paul scowled down at me. Get that image out of your mind, Blair. But nothing, he said firmly. Or I'll give you something else to think about. A strong arm went around my waist, and I gulped. Not good. You win, I said hastily. I'm already thinking of something else. Paul shook his head in mock disappointment. You give in too easily, Agapulamau. It's called self-preservation. I see. His voice was pleasant, too pleasant, and unease stirred inside of me. Paul, my voice broke off as I felt his arm tighten around my waist again. A pity you didn't have the same concern when you left your house despite my warnings. I knew you'd get around to that sooner or later. I kept my voice light and teasing, hoping to defuse the sudden tension in the room, but Paul's handsome face remained unsmiling. You almost died out there, Blair. His voice was taut, and the way he was suddenly looking at me made my throat tighten. If I hadn't found you in time. But you did, I whispered. But what if I didn't, he gritted out. You can't take such chances. The look on his face was unbearable. It thrilled and confused me, and I could only shake my head, asking tremulously, why do you worry so much about me? You've only known me for days. It's been more than days, Blair, he said quietly. You and I both know you've been watching me a lot longer than that. Oh, and it was the same for me. I couldn't stop watching you from the first day I saw you in Pandas. My fingers curled involuntarily against his chest, and Paul inhaled sharply. What exactly are you saying? I don't want to see you hurt, he said flatly. Isn't that obvious enough? You know that's not what I'm asking. I swallowed hard. Why do you worry so much over me? Does there have to be a reason? His gaze became veiled. Isn't it enough that I just do? Was it? Should it be enough? All this was so new to me. Paul tipped my chin up. I know I can't stop you from doing your job, but can we at least agree to some ground rules? I bit my lip, feeling torn between the desire to alleviate his worries and the need to assert my independence. I'm not a kid, Paul. Then act like it, he retorted. I told you tonight would be a war zone, didn't I? He had me there. I had no idea Zeus thunderbolts could do anything like that, I confessed reluctantly. Even now, just remembering how close I was to having a thunderbolt stab me to death had me swallowing hard. I was definitely not taking my chances next time. Zeus has different kinds of thunderbolts in his arsenal, Paul explained curtly. The one you saw was the deadliest. It's programmable, and 100% accurate once it's locked onto its target. And you think Zeus programmed it to target witches? We can't say for sure, but most of us think it's worse than that. I paled. Are you saying it's programmed to target humans, too? I'm saying it's programmed to target anything that lives and breathes. Paul's tone was hard. That's why no place is safe for any one of us, and that's why I want us to work on those ground rules. 1, 2, 3 seconds passed. More time lapsed, but I just couldn't think of a way to get past those ground rules without making myself seem as dreadfully unreasonable as a kid. Fine, I grumbled. You win. Ground rules it is, but I swear, if you even think of mentioning detention. Mr. Oh so mature leaned back against his seat, drawling, now that you've mentioned it. I glared at him. Paul threw his hands up in a gesture of surrender. A joke, just a joke, Agent Vavrin. Just so we're clear, I stressed, still suspicious. We are. He tugged a lock of my hair, and his lips curved when I refused to relax even as the gesture had my spine tingling. I meant what I said, Blair. I'm not going to interfere with your work. He paused. But I don't want to see you risking life and limb for it either. But if the situation calls for it. Let me rephrase that. I don't want you taking unnecessary risks, and so here's one simple ground rule. Just let me know where you are or where you're heading at all times. I waited, and when I realized that was all he was going to ask. That's it. I asked dubiously. He spread his hands out by way of waving the white flag. That's it. My gaze narrowed. This isn't some kind of trick, is it? If you want more ground rules, Paul drawled, all you have to do is ask. Oops. I shook my head, saying quickly, no, actually, that one ground rule is perfect. He smirked. I thought you'd say that. He glanced at my teacup. Do you want another? I'm okay. My gaze drifted absently to my watch. 9:30. I hadn't had dinner yet and, oh, I forgot to tell you about what I discovered at the Voice Factor, I gasped, and Paul listened attentively as I told him what I learned. That's good work. Paul's voice had turned vague, and I could see that his mind was already on what next steps to take. We'll need tech support. I grabbed my phone. On it. Tell them this is code P. I hesitated. You're sure? P stood for Pandora, and code P meant the situation had hit rock bottom, the equivalent of Pandora's box unleashing an unholy horror on mankind. Among other things, it granted tech support permission to hack even into government-owned systems, something we tried our best to avoid because it risked exposure for non-humans if we were caught. We have no choice. I received word earlier from Olympus. The only reason we have a lull in the storm right now is because Hermes was able to use one of Hypnos' sleeping spells to knock the thunder god out. Doesn't he have to be physically close to Zeus to make that kind of spell work? Paul nodded curtly. He didn't need to get inside the battle tower, but he did have to get close enough that it cost him a torn wing. Poor Hermes. The fleet-footed god may be an Olympian himself, but none of those things saved him from feeling pain the way we all did. He'll live, Paul said gruffly. I supposed he would, and that even with his injured wing, Hermes still had better chances of surviving the coming storm. How long do you think the spell would last? How soon before Zeus wakes up? No one really knows, but when he wakes up, Paul's voice turned harsh. He'll be fit to destroy the world. A pair of gentlemen showed up on my doorstep at exactly 8 in the morning, both of them dressed in, naturally, dark suits. They gave me polite, friendly smiles as they introduced themselves, Troy with the blue eyes, and Philip with the days-old stubble, and told me I had only to ask if I needed anything. Do you know where Paul is or what he's working on right now? The men exchanged looks. Well, anything except that, Troy amended. Mary Lou was agog with curiosity and didn't waste time asking questions as soon as I got past the double doors. That wasn't the Interpol detective, was it? No. The nymph rolled her eyes when I couldn't be more forthcoming. Come on, Blair, she wheedled. At least tell me who they are. They're also from Interpol. And I gotta go, I have a meeting with Dyke. Or so I did, but all I really wanted was to escape before Mary Lou pried out more information from me. Our division director called for Lana and Agent Grease as soon as I entered her office, and at her cue, I provided them with the latest update. Detective Paul emailed me early this morning. He says Interpol's convinced Dion that it's in his interest to work with them, but it will still take time. Dion doesn't keep records on non-human employees, so tech support has to comb through all the surveillance footage in hopes of finding a match. Dyke turned to Lana. Any news from tech support? When Code P went into effect last night, we've tapped into surveillance cameras within a mile's radius of every establishment Dion owns. We should have come up with results by now, but we don't even have a single possible match. Lana took a deep breath before saying reluctantly, we think Jane Doe used a retroactive camouflage spell sometime in the past 24 hours to cover her trail. Lana's report left me stunned. A retroactive camouflage spell was classified weapon material, the non-human's equivalent to government-exclusive firearms like the AA-12 Atchison assault shotgun. The spell Lana spoke of was able to delete all types of evidence, printed photos, digital files, and just about everything connected to the spell's subject. Once activated, any such data from that point in time and all the way back to the subject's date of birth would be erased. That's a serious accusation, Agent, Tamara voiced sharply. It's the only logical explanation. Is it, really? Or maybe you guys simply aren't looking hard enough. Lana stiffened at the implied criticism. We know what's at risk here. We wouldn't be so careless or negligent. Dyke raised her hand. Enough. Her voice, treacherous softness underlined by razor-sharp steel, sliced everyone's words into silence. Agent Grease's concern is understandable. Lana, I'd appreciate if you could get the other agents to make a sweep of everything again, and failing that, I'd like you to continue monitoring real-time footage. Assuming that such a spell is in effect, it doesn't cover any footage made past the date of activation, yes? Lana nodded. That said, Dyke turned to Agent Grease. Agent Spears was also right to bring up such a possibility. We are not the kind of agency that operates with our heads buried in the sand, Agent Grease. If by any chance our Jane Doe is using such a spell, then we need to act based on worst-case scenario and assume that the whole system is compromised. I wasn't the same girl when I left Dyke's office. I had never realized how naive and idealistic I was when I first worked for the agency. It had never occurred to me that it was possible for one of us to betray the agency, but that was obviously a possibility now, and one I couldn't deny. Zeus' spell-induced slumber had forced everything into a standstill, and with the non-human public suspicious but still mostly unaware of the threat literally hanging over our heads, all agents had been ordered to proceed as normal. In my case, that meant continuing to field calls about a missing cauldron at Demi's bakery, Mr. Norton's pet that was possibly showing signs of low-level demonic possession, and pretending I was my usual self as I turned down a date from Jason, a handsome, easygoing executive based in the city. We had been seatmates in my flight out of California, and we had been friends ever since. You sound stressed, Jason commented bluntly. Are you still adjusting to your new job? More or less, I hedged, not wanting to elaborate. Maybe we could talk it over dinner. I had to laugh, thinking how it was just like Jason not to give up after the first try. What happened this time? Although Silver Mist was an hour's drive away from Portland, Jason once told me that the distance was a small price to pay in exchange for enjoying one evening of no-strings-attached fun. A woman tried to spike my drink over lunch, he revealed in disgust. How bad do you think that is? Very bad, I had to concede. Enough to take pity on a poor guy. I couldn't help but roll my eyes. Ha! He had more money than he would ever know what to do with in a lifetime. That was how poor he was. Just dinner, he cajoled. I honestly can't, not tonight. But next time. If you mean that, give me a date then. I glanced at my calendar, thinking that all these blank boxes and crossed-out dates would mean nothing if we didn't survive tonight. We have a local fair coming up 2 Saturdays from now, I said finally. Perfect. What time should I pick you up? When I put the phone down, I was startled to find Roseanne standing behind my cubicle, and with a smile on her lips that could only be described as catty. "How very shocking," she sneered. "Who would think someone like you would be juggling your time between several men?" "Excuse me." Was she seriously accusing me of playing around? "So it isn't serious between you and the Interpol detective. So that was what this was all about." She was interested in Paul. I slowly shook my head, saying haltingly, "We only work together." Her lip curled. "So you're telling me he sends out an escorted Bentley SUV for every person he's worked with?" My surprise must have been shown, since Roseanne spat. "They dropped you off right in front of the lobby, little girl. Do you think people wouldn't notice?" Her voice started to rise. "You wanted to be seen and so you were seen. Is this official business, Roseanne?" a cool voice interrupted, "or could you spare Blair for a second?" Roseanne's lips tightened when she saw who it was. "The little girl's all yours, Agent Grease." She stalked away without looking back, and Tamara shook her head as she leaned against the wall of my cubicle. "She really has it for you, doesn't she?" "We have our differences," I said lamely, wondering all the while if everyone in SMHS knew of Roseanne's inexplicable grudge against me. Then again, everyone did see the shiny Bentley coming up the driveway. I could only shrug awkwardly in response, knowing that any honest explanation would only make things sound more serious between Paul and me. He had called me up early this morning, saying that he had assigned 2 of his men to follow me around as added protection, in the event that our anonymous shooter had me as his next target. "It's either me or them, Blair," he had asserted calmly. "It's your choice." But of course Paul had known it wasn't a choice at all. I'd have to be the most selfish idiot to have Paul act as chauffeur when he had so many better things to do with his time. "Your face is giving you away, Agent Vavrin," Tamara said with a sympathetic smile. "I'm guessing our Interpol detective didn't give you a choice over this morning's ride." Well, I didn't really want to say anything against Paul, but I had no intentions of lying either. "No need to cover up for him, Agent Vavrin," the CIA agent dryly. "Don't forget, I've had the pleasure of seeing him in action, and he strikes me as the kind of person who's used to getting his way." "You don't know the half of it," I thought, but out loud, I said diplomatically, "It's probably because he's Interpol." "That was what I was thinking, too," Tamara admitted. "And that's why I sought you out now actually. I just wanted to make sure everything's alright between us after yesterday." "It is," I said quickly. "I truly understand where you were coming from." The other agent started shaking her head, and I stopped speaking. "I was out of line, Blair," she said ruefully. "It's as you said, you know. He's Interpol, and I had no right to question his decision like that. I still don't understand what it is that you can do that I can't, but obviously Detective Paul without a surname." I choked back a laugh. "Sees differently, and I should have respected that." She offered her hand. "So, no hard feelings?" "Not a one." I shook her hand, touched that the older woman would go out of her way to clear things up like this. Tamara had already started to walk away when she suddenly turned back to look at me, saying, "I almost forgot. Any new updates on the case?" "No, unfortunately. But if Paul lets me know or anything, I'll keep you posted." "I'd appreciate that." Tristan and Maria pounced on me as soon as Agent Grease left the office. "What was that about?" Maria asked curiously while Tristan perched himself on my desk and pulled his girlfriend close to sit on his lap. "Minor case-related issue," I said evasively. "What are you guys working on right now?" "A will," Tristan answered, "possibly falsified." Forgery was as much a crime as it was in the non-human world, and Maria specialized in detecting spells used to forge documents. Tristan's field of expertise, on the other hand, was the equivalent of forensic biology. Every time an individual performed a spell, the magic a non-human wielded left an impression as unique as a person's DNA. Unfortunately, a person with the right knowledge could also avoid leaving such impressions, the way a human criminal would remove all traces of blood from a crime scene. It seems strange, doesn't it? Maria's voice was unusually somber. Working like everything's normal even when it's not. I looked outside our window. It was a deceptively sunny day, but who knew how long it would last? Chapter 10. Time moved ever so slowly, and I had just finished writing my case reports for the entire month when I got a call from Lana. I might have found a possible hit, she told me in a rush, but it's well below our benchmark. I'll take it, I said without hesitation. At this point, verifying the flimsiest of leads was better than doing nothing, which was gradually driving me crazy. I conducted a new search based on the assumption that a retroactive camouflage spell was in effect. So you found real-time footage of our Jane Doe? Not quite. That's why I told you this is below our benchmark. With this new search, I used second-hand information as my data source, and thank Gia for people's obsession with social media. You're losing me, Lana. Remember how the siren you spoke to described our Jane Doe? She asked eagerly. I used your transcript to acquire new search parameters, and then I started digging and going through all online conversations involving sirens working for Dion's establishments. From there, I narrowed the search to anything that had to do with a siren who didn't dress like the others did and was more human than siren. I finished rather breathlessly. Lana, you're a genius. Not if you ask Agent Grease, she muttered. She just wants to solve this case as much as we do, I soothed. I don't think so. Lana was normally reticent about most things, but she could be a tad bit belligerent when someone tried to mess with her work. Anyway, don't let Agent Grease know about this yet. It's just a hunch anyway. I trust your hunches, I assured her. You'll have to drive all the way to Portland for it, Lana warned, and my hunch mostly has to do with a couple of sirens having their own Facebook group chat to talk about a certain Amanda who, quote-unquote, has no problem poaching other girls' clients. That does sound like our Jane Doe, I murmured, remembering Monica's theory about the missing siren. A certain Sonia also complains, and I quote, she keeps using my phone, and she never bothers to ask for my permission. I'm not sure about that. It was a rude thing to do, but I wasn't sure that had any bearing on my Jane Doe. Anything else I should know? If Amanda is the Jane Doe we're looking for, according to the Facebook chat I'm following, she's missed work for 3 days in a row now. 3 days, I echoed slowly. It had also been 3 days since Zeus' so-called mood swings had started, and didn't that make quite a coincidence? Troy and Philip already had the Bentley running as soon as I stepped out of headquarters, with instructions to take me to Portland Got's Talents, which was yet another seriously questionable choice of name for one of Dion's bars. A grim-faced Paul was waiting for me by the front door when we arrived, and he wasted no time flashing his badge and getting the bouncer to take us to the employees' private quarters. We showed the sirens the photo of our Jane Doe, probably the only one existing in the world. If not for tech support's strict adherence to SOP, a retroactive camouflage spell would have made the photo I obtained from Midas Casino vanish as well. Is this Amanda? Paul asked. I felt lightheaded with relief when the sirens nodded even as they exchanged looks of confusion with each other. Is she in some kind of trouble? One of the women asked. It's not something we're at liberty to discuss at present, Paul evaded. He cast a glance at our surroundings, which had the same apartment layout as TVF's. Which room is hers? A siren named Sonia introduced herself as Amanda's roommate and volunteered to show us the space she shared with our missing person. It was a reasonably sized room, with one bed on each side. Sonia's half was a bit of a clutter while Amanda's side was neat and orderly, extremely so. Is it always like that? I asked. She hates mess, Sonia affirmed. None of Amanda's belongings appeared missing or disturbed, and this worried me. Her laptop was on the desk, next to her cell phone and purse. I glanced at Paul, and the hard look on his face told me he was thinking along the same lines. These days, people never left their cell phones behind by choice. At Paul's nod, Troy put on gloves, and I noticed Sonia pale when the blue-eyed agent whipped out evidence bags. Has something happened to her? The siren asked shakily. She's a person of interest, I answered quietly, and any kind of information you or the others could share about Amanda is of paramount importance. The atmosphere was tense when we returned to the living room, with the sirens huddled together on the couch as they nervously watched Troy carry out evidence bags containing Amanda's belongings. As the two agents left, Troy to take Amanda's possessions to CSI for analysis and Phil to deliver a report straight to MD Olympus, Paul and I set out to interview the sirens one at a time. A little while later, Dyke herself arrived, along with a large team of agents that included Lana and Agent Grease, and another round of questioning began. I expected the sirens to start getting restless, but they remained cooperative and quite willing to answer every question asked. When did you last see Amanda? 3 days ago. Has she ever spoken to any one of you or mentioned anything about Zeus? No. Has she exhibited any sign of unusual behavior? No. Have you noticed any suspicious person showing up in the bar or anywhere near this place in the past 3 days? No. We rephrased the questions, asking the same things over and over in hopes of tripping one of them into betraying themselves, but none of the sirens did. It was almost midnight when Dyke finally decided to call it a day, and the jubilation we had felt earlier upon finding our Jane Doe was completely gone. Both CSI's lab team and tech support hadn't been able to extract any kind of evidence from Amanda's laptop or mobile phone. Amanda's room was also completely clean. As the other agents piled into the black sedans that lined up the street, I started to do the same only to have Paul cup my elbow and turn me towards the other direction. Let me drive you home. I wrinkled my nose at his bit of high-handedness. Is that a request or an order? Whichever will get you inside my car, Paul answered mildly, all the while leading me to his car. I considered standing my ground and telling him that these things he did would only have more people talking about us. Paul opened the door for me. Blair. Oh, never mind. Who cared about what people said? If the world were to end soon, wouldn't it be better if I spent more time with Mr. Handsome? Paul asked me what I thought of the other sirens as he started to drive, and I took my time mulling over his question. It didn't seem like they were lying, I said slowly. Did you feel they were? No, the single word seethed with such frustration, I couldn't help but blink, and a grimace touched his lips at my reaction. Sorry. I'm not used to drawing blanks, but there's just something about them. You can't quite put your finger on. Paul's gaze narrowed. They bothered you, too, didn't you? They did. For one thing, none of them acted like you were Mr. Handsome. Paul sputtered. I'm serious, I insisted. Look at how Roseanne reacted to you. Even Agent Grease wasn't immune to your looks. Sirens love beautiful things. And you think I'm beautiful? He asked with a hint of a smile. Is that it? I quickly turned my head away, not wanting him to see how my face had turned red. For an Interpol detective, I couldn't help muttering under my breath, you're horribly bad at getting the point. Silence, but I could practically feel him laughing at me. Clearing my throat, I said quickly, anyway, that's not the only thing that bothered me. There's also the lack of motive. I can't seem to come up with any possible reason for one of them to go after Amanda and Zeus. It could be there isn't any possible correlation, he murmured pensively. Amanda could have had her own reasons for poisoning Zeus, and we could have one or more individuals responsible for Amanda's disappearance but without having anything to do with Zeus' condition. That was a good point, but a more complex one at that, and I made a face. Okay, now my head hurts. Paul flashed a slight smile at my quip, and despite everything, my heart still managed to skip a beat at the sight. Here we were, facing imminent global disaster, and all I could think about was how handsome the man seated next to me was. I mentally shook my head. Focus, Blair. Now wasn't the right time to think about Paul's looks. I had to focus on preventing the end of the world first, and after that, I'll find the courage to ask him out, I promised myself. I'll even swear it by the river of Styx. I shot up in my seat, and Paul looked at me sharply. What is it? Our river of Lethe, I stammered, my mind already racing. Its water surrounded the cave of the god of sleep, and a single drop of it was known to cause anywhere from disorientation to permanent amnesia. Paul jerked the steering wheel to the side, and I knew he was thinking along the same lines I did as the car made an abrupt 180-degree turn, and we started heading back the way we came. I reached for my phone to update Dyke and the others, and things kept adding up with every second that passed. The reason why everyone's answers was exactly the same. The reason why every word they spoke seemed true. The reason why no one had even blinked at Paul's sheer good looks. Do you think Amanda could have done it? She could have been the one to administer the potion, Paul said, but I doubt she had the ability to brew it. Lethe is a powerful but complex substance. You need to configure its molecular properties if you want an individual to forget something specific. Then she has an accomplice. That's what you're saying, aren't you? Not just any accomplice, Paul said darkly, but someone who's either working in one of the agencies or has connections to it. And whoever it is, the person's likely our anonymous shooter as well. I rubbed the sides of my temple, thinking that the web of deceit surrounding Zeus' condition just kept getting complicated. With every thread we were able to untangle, a dozen more seemed to knot itself together. Would we ever manage to unravel this before the thunder god rose from his slumber? Chapter 11. It was 3:30 in the morning by the time the agents in lab coats finished analyzing the blood samples they had taken from the sirens, and the result confirmed our suspicions. Minimal traces of Lethe found, enough to cause a minor memory block. What exactly do you mean by minor? Dake asked the NSA agent who had brought us the results. The potion's configuration is based on a specific set of triggers. The poor guy was nearly babbling, visibly rattled as he was by the daughter of Justice's harsh scowl. Anything related to those triggers has been permanently deleted. Everything else remains the same. I frowned, thinking that didn't sound minor at all. Is it possible to get around these triggers by asking a certain type of question? Maybe if I described Amanda in such a way without mentioning her name. That could work. It was Tamara who spoke up. But only if the trigger isn't time-based. For all we know, the potion could have been configured to delete all trigger-related memories from the moment Amanda concocted her plans against Zeus. Gia bewitched, but she was just so good at bursting people's bubbles. It doesn't matter, Paul said finally. There's nothing to lose by questioning again. You're right, of course. This time, Tamara was quick to back down. For their second round of questioning, the sirens had been marshaled into the CSI's interrogation room, and one glance at their enraged expressions through the two-way mirror had me realizing it was as Monica had said, sirens did not appreciate being dragged out of their beds. Dyke, Agent Grease, and several other high-level CIA agents entered the room to question the sirens. Paul stood beside me, his expression unreadable as he watched the proceedings. Do you want to have your turn? I shook my head. I'm sure the agents inside are more than enough. They have more interrogation experience than I do. Experience isn't everything, Paul said gently. We all bring something unique to the table, and it rarely has anything to do with experience or expertise. Take out expertise and experience, and doesn't that just leave luck? One corner of Paul's lips lifted up in a half-smile, and he added solemnly, don't forget humor. He started to say something else, but the audible vibration of his phone interrupted him, and Paul took it out of his pocket with a frown. Good news? I asked hopefully. Afraid not. Paul looked up. Zeus has started to stir. Interpol agents had gathered outside the gates of Olympus. One of Iris Field reporters broadcasted live over the radio, and human allies with top government positions from all over the world had now been informed of Zeus' condition. If the thunder god was to wake on the wrong side of the bed, the world was ready to face his wrath, for better or for worse. I paced restlessly outside the interrogation room, one part of me listening to the ongoing questioning while the other half of me worried about Paul being in the front line of battle. I was 99% sure he was immortal, but so was Zeus, and the latter was an Olympian to boot. The chance of an immortal beating an Olympian god was 1 in a million, and Kronos knew how much I hated such odds. Think, Blair. Think. Sirens were already being questioned. Amanda was still missing. Her room and belongings had been thoroughly swept for evidence, and our agents had been unable to produce a single new lead from them. So what else? What else can I do? What else was missing? What could Amanda have used that wouldn't be affected by both the retroactive camouflage spell and the potion? It was unlikely something Amanda owned herself, so maybe. Oh. I fumbled for my phone and quickly scrolled down until I found the transcript Lana had sent me of the Facebook chat she had hacked into. Someone had mentioned about Amanda using another siren's phone. Bingo! It was Sonia, Amanda's roommate. I hurried to tech support, heart beating madly as I thought of what I could find. People rounded up for questioning weren't allowed to bring inside any electronic device or sharp object inside the interrogation room, and any prohibited items were immediately handed over to tech support for temporary custody. Please let this be it, Holy One. Please. I breathed a sigh of relief when I saw a familiar face behind the counter. Hey Greg. The 19-year-old intern beamed. Blair, hi. You know about the sirens we brought over for questioning? Ah, yes. Do you need anything for evidence? Yes. I couldn't quite meet the younger boy's gaze as I uttered the lie, but I reminded myself that desperate straits called for desperate measures. I need the mobile phone of Sonia Patel. Sure thing. Be back in a sec. I tried not to bite my nails as I watched Greg disappear into the storage room. Behind me, I heard the doors open, and a familiar voice ask in surprise, Blair? What are you doing here? It was Lana. Greg came back with Sonia's phone in an evidence bag just as Lana reached my side. I saw her eyes widen, and I shot her a warning look when she started to speak. Turning back to Greg, I said quickly, You're a huge help. Thanks. I swiped the bag out of his hand and dragged Lana with me towards her cubicle. What are you doing? Lana asked under her breath. It's my turn to have a hunch. Lana's eyes widened when she saw me take the phone out of the evidence bag with my bare hands. Blair. You don't have any gloves. We don't have any time for that, I muttered. Even I flinched inside. Mishandling evidence went against every work principle I had, but I had no choice. Remember the Facebook chat you hacked into? This is the phone mentioned in it, the one Amanda liked to borrow. Lana's face cleared, and I knew right away she understood what I was asking her to do. On it. She gave me a phone cable. I need you to plug it in first. Fingerprints on that phone's already one too many. Lana's monitor lit up the moment I plugged Sonia's phone in, and the other girl's fingers flew over the keyboard as she ran a search on the phone's contents, waiting for something, anything, to stand out. 10 minutes later, we found ourselves staring at a Craigslist ad. $50,000 for a beautiful, adventurous woman who wants to turn her life around. Even the timeline matched, with the ad posting taken down just 2 days before Zeus was poisoned. Let me use reverse lookup for this, Lana muttered. English please. Oops, sorry. What I mean is that we have a special system, Lana continued typing as she spoke, with her gaze flitting between her monitor and Sonia's phone. It's far more advanced than what humans use, and it basically allows us to determine the physical location of a data source. So with this Craigslist ad, we might not be able to find out who sent it, but we can at least pinpoint the sender's exact location when this ad was first uploaded. Countless rows of numbers kept zooming up Lana's monitor while the screen of Sonia's phone remained black. How long will this take? I asked worriedly. Any moment now. Another minute passed. Lana, be patient. It's an automated search, so I can't do anything. Sonia's screen suddenly lit up, and the numbers on her monitor disappeared. Lana's face broke into a smile. We got it, Blair. A map showed up on her monitor, zooming closer and closer until both of us inhaled sharply as we realized at the same time what we were staring at. Pinpointed on the map was the office of the CIA. Chapter 12. Rain had resumed lashing the ground outside headquarters as I entered the CIA's block of offices. Zeus was starting to wake, and a countdown had begun. The whole place was still quiet and empty, with agents either out on the field or in the interrogation room. It was my first time to be here, and I tried to contain my anxiety as I looked down the rows of doors that lined up the long, high-ceilinged hallway. Don't panic. You can still solve this in time, Blair. Are you in? Lana's voice whispered out of my earpiece. Yes. I kept my voice low. Ready when you are. My footsteps fell silently against the floor as I slowly moved forward, fingers curling helplessly against my thighs as I mentally lamented the loss of my wand. Without it, I was reduced to manual spells and hand-to-hand combat, two things I were absolutely not good at. Looking back, I counted 5 pairs of doors that I had walked past. Still nothing. I asked under my breath. Just keep walking, Lana urged. Using the IP address provided by the Craigslist posting, Lana had wielded her kind of magic to hunt down our anonymous perp in the form of a GPS tracking virus. After, she had installed a program in my phone that would allow her to locate whatever agency-issued device or equipment the perp had used, now made identifiable by Lana's virus. It was honestly too complicated for my not-so-technical mind to understand, but right now the only thing that mattered was that I trusted Lana, and the fact that we had so little time left before Zeus ended up torching the whole of New England with his thunderbolts. Stop! Lana's half-shriek had me jerking as I forced myself to a screeching halt. Cast it, Lana, I muttered, you didn't have to shout. I know, I'm sorry, you're near, she ended lamely. We were about halfway down the hall, and I had one door on each of my side. I walked towards the left when Lana suddenly said, not that. The signal's weakening. I backed up and moved towards the right door. That's it. Lana's voice tinged with trepidation. The knob vibrated under my fingers as its identification spell worked on verifying my credentials. A clicking sound followed as the door unlocked itself, and I exhaled, realizing only at that moment I had been holding my breath the whole time. Even now, as I advanced warily inside the office, I had a hard time believing it was truly a CIA agent responsible for poisoning Zeus. Why would one of us do this? It just didn't make sense. With the shutters drawn, I had to make my way in the darkness, heart thudding against my chest. Lightning flashed outside the hallway, illuminating the entire office for but a moment. I made out an iMac on top of a large desk, the only one inside the room, and my stomach turned upside down in dismay. So we weren't just up against any ordinary agent but a ranking officer to boot. The windows started to vibrate, and I almost jumped when I heard a thunderous boom explode outside. It started, I realized bleakly. Squaring my shoulders, I moved forward more quickly, this time determined to get to the bottom of it. I had to find out who it was. Lighting flashed once more, and I jumped back with a gasp when I saw a figure sitting on the chair. What was that? Was it real? Or did I only imagine it? Blair? Lana demanded worriedly from the earpiece. Outside, another thunderbolt hurtled out of the heavens with a loud boom, the sound too close for comfort, and my eyes squeezed shut as trauma tried to seize control of my mind. Memories invaded my thoughts, and I shuddered as I recalled the blazing heat of Zeus' thunderbolt. You're okay, Blair. You're safe. You're alive. Blinding light struck my eyelids, and I opened my eyes, confused and disoriented at seeing the office suddenly ablaze with light. A moment later, I saw someone reaching towards me, and I scrambled back, but it was too late. Fingers pulled my hair, and I screamed as I shoved my assailant off, heart pounding, and the side of my scalp stinging. I touched my left ear and realized that whoever it was had ripped my earpiece off, effectively disconnecting me from Lana. I slowly looked up, 1,000 possibilities running through my mind, but when my gaze collided with the other woman's, I realized that I would never have guessed the truth. I thought I'd find you here. It was Agent Tamara Grease, and she had a gun pointed straight at me. A level 1 witch versus a level 5 one was like pitting someone who took a single cumin class against a mathematician. It was pointless and hopeless, but even so I gave it my best shot. My gaze flew to the window behind her, and I screamed, "Paul, now." Tamara whirled around. "Ha! Sucker." It was a childish thought, but cut me some slack. I was fighting for my life here. Wasting no time, I took advantage of her momentary distraction and tore out of the office. Her scream of fury bounced into the hallway, and the hairs behind my neck stood up. That was the sound of one pissed-off murderer if I ever heard one, and I had just shot straight up to the top spot of her kill list. Tamara blasted a hole out of her office wall and began firing at me. It was a grand entrance, I'd give her that, and I would probably have told her so if I hadn't been too busy deflecting both her spell bolts and bullets. Thank God and Gia for shield spells, which was the first thing our self-defense instructor had taught us. They probably knew it was a neophyte's best chance of surviving, in the event they had a student foolish enough to go up against an advanced level witch. Case in point, yours truly, who was now trying her best to talk her way out of certain death. Don't do this, Tamara. I will certainly do this, with much pleasure. It was hard, arguing with a madwoman while manually whipping out one shield spell one after, but I managed. It wasn't like I had a choice. You can still give yourself up. How about taking your own advice and not making this hard for yourself? Tamara took aim again and pulled the trigger. Bang! Kronos saved me, but that would have been a headshot it not for my shield spell doing its job. Why are you doing this? Did Zeus dump you? Is that it? You bitch. No, that would be you, I think. Tamara tried to shoot me again and howled in outrage when she realized she had run out of bullets. She was making so much noise a whole squad of agents should have come to my rescue by now, but with a poisoned Zeus creating his own kind of havoc outside, I knew it would be futile to even try dialing for 911. Tossing the gun aside, Tamara went after me again, snarling, "I'll kill you. I swear I'll kill you. And you're psychotic, I swear, I absolutely swear you are." Of course I knew I was better off keeping my mouth shut than provoking her like this, but I couldn't help it. I turned snarky when someone was trying to kill me. It was stupid, and I hadn't known about this part of me until now, but it was the truth, so there. Tamara blasted another spell bolt at me, too fast for me to ward off with a shield spell, and I ended up jumping out of its way. Unfortunately, I hadn't thought of checking which way I would end up, and when I felt my back hit something cold. Uh-oh. The window pane shattered at the impact, and I started to fall. Double uh-oh. A moment later, I saw Tamara jump out of the window, her cold-blooded eyes trained on me. Triple uh-oh. It was official. The other woman had lost her mind, hell-bent as she was on killing me that she would even risk her own life. And then I saw it, a long brown stick peeking from between her legs, and I realized she had been able to summon her broom before flying out of the window. Cast it. Not so insane, after all. I mentally braced myself for impact as I continued to fall while the electric purple sky zoomed out in seeming slow motion. They say falling to your death wouldn't cause a person any kind of pain, the impact too massive that the loss of life would be instantaneous. I really hoped that was true because otherwise I'd have to feel my skull crack against the ground, and I doubt that would feel anything but excruciating. Tamara's eyes locked with mine. You should have minded your own business. Maybe. But even now, with just seconds left before I lost my life, I couldn't make myself regret it. If I had to do it all over again, I knew I would have done the exact same thing. But if I could ask for one miracle, though, I want to see Paul, I heard myself whisper foolishly. It didn't seem right that the face of an insane murderer was the last thing I'd see before I died. Then open your eyes, Agapolamau. My chest heaved in a sigh at the familiar sound of Mr. Handsome's voice. That was it, then. I had died, I was in heaven, and an imaginary Paul was my reward. Strong arms caught me just as the sound of spell bolts violently clashing against each other had my eyes flying open. What in the lair? Oh, golden hair, chiseled features, and a powerful body sheathed in an immaculate dark suit. People. I stammered. Hello, Blair. But his gaze remained straight ahead, and as I dizzily followed his line of sight, I saw a demented-looking Tamara balanced on her broomstick and her hands moving wildly about in a casting frenzy, one to keep her shield spell up, and another to hurl a barrage of spell bolts towards us. She put up a heck of a fight, in other words, but it was just as clear that nothing she did would ever be enough to beat off the Interpol detective clasping me to his side with one arm around my waist. It's over, Agent Grease. He advanced towards her at a steady pace, his demeanor terrifyingly calm as he used his one free hand to deflect her spell bolts and fire his own at the same time. Never. Tamara's hysterical scream rose over the cacophony of blowing winds and rainstorm. I'll make him pay. A shudder of rage shook her form, and she screamed as she fired another torrent of spell bolts, all of which Paul deflected with a wave of his arm. Seriously, how strong were these Interpol detectives? Were they secret descendants of Hercules? Achilles? Maybe even the biblical Samson. I won't stop until I make him pay. Paul suddenly twisted to the side, and I barely managed to hold on to him as he flew. Oh my Gia, where was his broom? Us away from Tamara. What? And then I saw it, a thunderbolt finding its mark as it raced down from the heavens, and even though I knew there was nothing I could do, and that if our positions had been reversed, she probably would have let Zeus' murderous bolt spirit's target, I could never wish a person dead. Tamara, look out! But it was too late. Tamara's lips parted in a soundless scream of agony as the bolt tore through her body. Fire claimed her in the next second, and I knew the exact moment she died. We all knew. Impossible not to, when the stormy skies vanished at her last breath, and the wind gods fell from the skies, released at last from Zeus' orders of pillage and destruction. Apparently, the antidote we were looking for was nothing more than Agent Tamara Grease's death. Chapter 13. Why are you doing this? Did Zeus dump you? Is that it? You bitch. No, that would be you, I think. I'll kill you. I swear I'll kill you. And you're psychotic, I swear, I absolutely swear you are. Dyke hit the stop button, and the screen froze just as I fell out of the window. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how not to negotiate with a potentially psychotic opponent. I wanted to shrink in my seat as every CSI agent of the department turned to look at me. Then again, Agent Vavrin was a huge help in preventing the end of the world, so all's well that ends well. Let's give her a round of applause. The other agents started to clap. Okay, that's enough. Our division director waved towards the doors, which again flew open under her command. Dismissed. I stood up with the others, but I had only taken a few steps when I heard the daughter of Justice say coolly, "Except you, Agent Vavrin. Brooms and sticks." Was I in trouble? A week had passed since Agent Tamara Grease's death, but the mood in headquarters remained somber. Many of us, myself included, remained shell-shocked at the deceased agent's crimes, the full extent of which had been revealed by a memory post-mortem conducted on her remains. Zeus' refusal to make her immortal had been a serious bone of contention between the clandestine lovers, and the thunder god dumping her for another woman had been the last straw. The Craigslist posting had allowed Agent Grease to hire Amanda to poison Zeus, but when the siren had come to collect her money, Tamara had paid her off with a bullet to the temple and buried Amanda in her own backyard. After that, she had pulled several strings to ensure she was the one Dyke would approach to represent CIA in handling Zeus' case. She had planned to provide misleading evidence from the start, which was why it had angered her greatly when Paul had pulled rank on her and insisted on working only with me. Tamara had also been the one who shot at Paul, hoping to discourage his interest in the case, and when that didn't work she had sought to befriend me instead. As for Zeus, the dosage Tamara had Amanda administer wasn't lethal or designed to permanently impair him, after all. It was only enough to last for a week, a period of time that Tamara believed was sufficient for the Olympian to lay wreck to most of New England. By the time the poison's effects wore off, thousands would have long died in Zeus' hands, the perfect revenge for the god who, despite his many weaknesses, had always loved mankind best. Now, Agent Vavrin. I automatically straightened in my seat as Dyke's coolly pleasant voice drew me out of my thoughts. Do you have any plans for tomorrow? Tomorrow was a Saturday. We weren't supposed to have work on Saturday. Or were we? Cancel it. Absolutely. I might be some hotshot neophyte in other agents' eyes now, but Dyke would always be Dyke, and I'd never be stupid enough to stop being afraid of her. I'll expect you to be here before 0800H, Dyke instructed, and we'll depart for MD Olympus at 0810H. My jaw dropped. Zeus wants to meet you. My jaw kept dropping. Dyke's gaze narrowed. Whatever happens, do not disappoint me. I couldn't answer. My jaw was still doing its best to reach the floor. Agent Vavrin. Okay, that would work. The daughter of Justice's sharp tone had me recovering from my shock, and I said quickly, "Understood, Director." Dismissed. I walked out of the conference room in a daze, wondering if I had dreamt the past 5 minutes. I would be visiting MT Olympus tomorrow. MT Olympus. It was an immortals-only zone, and it had been so for centuries. How in the world did I end up suddenly being invited to the mythical dwelling of Olympians? Tristan and Maria were waiting for me by my cubicle, and Maria burst into speech as soon as I collapsed on my seat. "What did Dyke tell you?" she asked eagerly. "Did you get a reward?" A promotion. I got invited to empty Olympus. Maria squealed in delight, loud enough to have other agents glance at us in curiosity, but she paid them no heed. Oh my Gia, that's completely unheard of, Blair, she exclaimed. That's like being invited to the White House or Buckingham Palace. Only it's 1,000 times better. She peppered me with questions. What did I intend to wear? What did I plan to say? Could I take photos? On and on it went that I had to raise a halting hand even as I couldn't help laughing. We still need to work, you know. Let's talk more about this over dinner tonight, promise. It was impossible to resist Maria when she was smiling like that, and I tossed Tristan a look of shared commiseration. Do you ever get your way with her? I don't even try, was the droll reply. Even so, Maria's excitement was infectious, and come lunch break I was in a similarly giddy state and wondering about of all those things she mentioned. What did one wear to empty Olympus? You look happy, Lana observed when I joined her at our usual cafeteria table. Does it have something to do with the fact that Dyke asked you to stay behind this morning after your meeting? I almost choked on my soda. Where did you get that? Lana rolled her eyes. Agents thrive on gossip, Blair. You should know that by now. No, actually, I don't, I said with a grimace, but I'll keep it in mind from now on. She looked at me expectantly after feeding herself a forkful of pasta. Well, I bit into my sandwich. What, Dyke? Private conversation. Hello, oh. Right. Lowering my sandwich back to my plate, I whispered the same thing I told Tristan and Maria, and Lana let out a loud gasp. I let out a low groan as all the agents in the cafeteria turned to us. Not again. Sorry. But Lana's grin belied her apology, and like Maria's, her excitement was contagious enough that I couldn't help grinning back. This is just too exciting for words, Lana said in a rush. Have you told Paul yet? I shook my head. Well, you should. I bet he'd be one happy, proud boyfriend. Lana. It was stupid, but I couldn't help turning red at the mere thought of Paul being my boyfriend. You know it's not like that between us. Do I? Lana's voice was thoughtful. When I called him that night and told him you were in danger, he was totally frantic. He likes to worry, I hedged. It was more than that. He sounded the way I imagined Tristan would if he found out Maria was in trouble. My shoulders moved in an awkward shrug. He's my mentor of sorts. Lana snorted. If he's your mentor, then I'm your long-lost father. I couldn't help but laugh. That doesn't even make sense. Exactly, she answered sweetly. Paul could be a lot of things, but he's definitely not just a mentor to you. Probably. I don't know. Maybe I was being too stubborn, but I simply didn't want to assume anything. You know, you never told me why you decided to call him of all people. I mean, why not Dyke? Lana grimaced. This is going to sound bad, but I honestly didn't even trust Dyke once I realized that CIA was compromised. So, you went with your gut instinct and called Paul. Lana smiled weakly. When you think about it now, it was a crazy risk, wasn't it? Crazy or not, it turned out to be the right decision. I gave her hand a quick squeeze. So if you ask me, I'll keep trusting your instincts. Luck was a factor, too, Lana acknowledged ruefully. When you plugged your phone to my computer, it automatically stored your contact list. Without that, I wouldn't have had a clue on how to contact him. It was Lana's turn to pause. You know, he got to headquarters really quickly, don't you think? I could only nod since I had wondered the same thing, too. Unless he had lied about having to go to MD Olympus, which I could see no reason why he should have, then the distance between the Olympians' dwelling and our headquarters wasn't exactly something you could cover in minutes. And yet, maybe it's an Interpol thing. Another memory occurred to me, something equally troubling, and I chewed on my lip. I never mentioned this in my report, but when he saved me from falling, I took a deep breath. He was flying, Lana. Her eyes went wide with disbelief. And I do mean flying, on his own, without using any broomstick or whatnot. Did you ask him how? The way Lana's voice trailed off made it seem like she couldn't even make herself say the words. It was simply that preposterous. Everyone knew that magic had its limits, and for humans to fly was one of them. I never got a chance to. I haven't seen him since that time. He calls me several times a day, though, but I just can't make myself ask. I don't think, it's not something you can ask over the phone, you know. Several moments of silence passed before Lana shook her head. Maybe we're overthinking this. Yeah, maybe it's just an Interpol thing. You're right. Or at least that was what I wanted to think. Because otherwise, I had no idea what these strange, inexplicable things made pull. Epilogue. Saturday dawned bright and sunny, and I arrived at SMHS 7:30, having decided that it was better to be extremely early rather than risk being a minute late and making our esteemed division director to wait for me. Dyke was a sight to behold when she arrived, with an intricately designed bronze helmet covering her hair and a resplendent centuries-old suit of armor worn over her tall, graceful figure. One look at her, and I knew Olympus was strictly black tie, ancient Greece style, which also meant I had made the right choice. Dyke gave my outfit a cursory look, and I held my breath. I had donned a flowing white empire-cut dress with a belt of gold tassels that laid low on my hips and matched the woven pattern of my leather sandals. Good choice, my superior said, and I silently breathed a sigh of relief. Thank Kronos for that. Dyke and I slid into the back seat of a black sedan, and as its engine roared into life, I looked about eagerly, wondering what it would shape-shift into. A winged stallion like Pegasus perhaps? Or maybe a sphinx or... The agent behind the wheel stepped on the gas, and the car sped out of the driveway. Any minute now. Any moment now. Any time now. What are you looking like that for? Dyke asked blankly. I was, trying to guess what this car would change into. Aren't you old enough to know that Transformers aren't real? The daughter of justice shook her head in disapproval. You need to be more discerning between myth and fiction, Agent Vavrin. My mouth opened and closed. I wasn't, I never, so, this really is just a car. The older woman shot me an irritable look. What else could it be? I tried to wrap my head around what she was saying. Then, it's possible to drive to Olympus. In a manner of speaking, yes. And so it seemed as 10 minutes later the car had sped past a wall of fog and onto a paved road that meandered through woods made breathtaking by its stunningly colorful foliage and drove past a sparkling brook in which mermaids swam alongside frolicking water nymphs. Finally, the car rolled to a stop in front of massive golden doors, and I knew with every excited beat of my heart that what I was staring at was none other than the doors of Olympus itself. Chin up, Agent Vavrin, Dyke commanded as we stepped out of the car. Yes, Director. Also, stop shaking. I'll do my best. Dyke glared at me. I meant, I'll never shake again in my entire life. That's better. The daughter of justice nodded at the guardsmen flanking the entrance, and they slowly pushed the doors open, their muscles straining with every inch that I could only imagine how heavy the doors were. Could it be made of real gold? A young girl in braids introduced herself as a muse's apprentice with a deep curtsy. Dyke gave her a nod, so I started to nod as well, until I saw my boss glaring at me. Oops. I curtsied back to the young girl, and only then did Dyke stop looking murderous. Olympus ballroom was amazing in its vastness, with towering marble pillars that went all the way up until it disappeared in a mass of fluffy clouds. It took me several moments to understand that I was literally looking at clouds, and that the sky actually served as the ballroom's ceiling. Very cool, I thought, but what if it rained? The couple on the throne chuckled. Dyke was glaring at me again. And I realized a second too late I had blurted my thought out loud. I was so dead. Come forward, Blair Vavrin. It was the man on the throne who spoke, tall and powerfully built, with a dramatically handsome face and a long dark beard. Sad Keanu, I thought yet again, but of course he wasn't just that. He was Zeus, the god who reigned in empty Olympus, and he knew my name. Zeus knew my name. My knees knocked against each other as I moved forward, stopping only before the edge of the dais. Remembering Dyke's lesson earlier, I made sure to curtsy this time, so deep that I almost lost my balance and toppled over. When I straightened, the couple on the throne was visibly amused, and Dyke looked like she wanted to throttle me. Okay, not only was I dead, but I was so going to be fired after this. We thank you for your aid. It was the dark-haired woman on the throne who spoke this time, and cast it, but she looked so much like a dead ringer for Charlize Theron that I felt like I had stepped into a movie set, and that would be, what? Sweet November. The Devil's Advocate. Or John Wick meets Atomic Blonde. Clearing my throat, I started to thank the Olympians when I realized one glaring hole in my vocabulary. How did one address Olympians? Thea, I heard Dyke cough from behind. I nearly expired in relief, and smiling nervously at Zeus and Hera, I stammered, "It was my honor to serve, Thea." How kind you are, Hera murmured with a smile. Indeed, Zeus agreed, which is why my wife and I would like to offer you any reward you choose. I automatically started to refuse, but then I saw Dyke scowl, and the look of deadly warning on her face was pretty easy to interpret. Refuse, and die. Don't be shy, child, Hera said soothingly. Well, Gia help me, but what could I ask that would make me appear neither greedy nor sycophantic? Speak your desire, Zeus urged, and it will be granted. Unable to bear everyone's scrutiny, I blurted out the first thing that came to my mind. I would like a photo with Apollo. Zeus and Hera stared at me in surprise. This time, Dyke looked like she wanted to kill herself. I guess that made me sound more like a teenage fangirl than a respectable agent of CSI. You are certain of this? Zeus inquired finally. Yes, Theo. Apollo is my favorite Olympian. This, at least, was true. Zeus' dark brows shot up. You favor him over me. Brooms and sticks. I. Hera threw her husband an exasperated glance. Stop teasing the child. Do you not see she's scared enough? Zeus grinned. I was merely having fun. I wondered if he truly meant that. 5 seconds ago, and I could have sworn he had considered having me beheaded. Hera motioned for the Muse's apprentice. Look for Apollo and tell him I request his presence. Immediately, Zeus added. Yes, Thea. The young girl curtsied before hurrying away. While waiting for the god of truth to make his appearance, Zeus and Hera spoke to Dyke in hushed tones, and in a language far too ancient for me to even guess its origin. A moment later, I saw Zeus' dark head lift, and a grin slashed over his lips. The heroine of Olympus is here, Apollo, and all she asks as a reward is a photo with you. Charming, is she not? Very much so. The voice from behind was deep, quiet, and strangely familiar, and I jerked in surprise. Surely, it couldn't be who I thought it was. As you requested, my dear, Hera said. Apollo has come. A shadow fell over me. I slowly lifted my gaze, and a pair of hazel eyes met mine. Paul. Hello, Blair. The end. Please look forward to Book 2, Brewing for Trouble. Please also check out Accidentally His Bride, a mafia romantasy by Marian, now available as full audiobook on YouTube.